Hope everybody can hear me out there in TV land. Looks like Don's there. John Peters, looks like you're there too. Don, I see you nodding. I think that means you can hear me, which is good. We're going to get started here.
Yeah, John Peters.
Hey, it's good to hear, John. Thank you. I think for projection, I may actually take this off. I'm like 10 feet from everybody. If that makes it easier for you to hear me, I think it's fine. We are here in the Cheshire United Methodist Church for our February division meeting. Jeff Hankey, I just took over as the superintendent, and we'll get to all that in a minute, but we also need to call this the annual meeting. I actually read the bylaws and the Constitution for the first time ever. Probably should admit that. But it's supposed to be done in the first quarter, and this is our only first quarter meeting, so I'm not sure if I'm allowed to do that or not. Ron may object to me doing that, but whatever. I did also want to start and say this is our first meeting that I know of ever in Cheshire, right? So I live here in Cheshire. We're lucky enough to get this room for nothing, which is awesome. I hope that means the furnace isn't blowing up. But the reality is I wanted to make this a little more lively in my presentation, so I got some online photos of railroading in Cheshire. People don't really think of Cheshire as a railroading town, but that rail-to-trail park that we have here actually used to be a railroad. And here's a nice shot. This is Boston and Maine 201 in Cheshire. They really only have two industries in Cheshire. One was a lumber plant, it's still here today. It's called Country Lumber. It just doesn't have rail anymore. Its path goes right by it. And then a little way down the road from that was a latex place called Copeland's. And so those are really the only two industries in town anymore in the modern era. The ball and socket, if you guys know where the ball and socket is in here in town, used to have rail service and stuff, but that's 100 plus years ago. I'm talking about what was available here. I didn't know if anybody knew, but that line actually washed out just south of town here in Hamden. Late 70s, early 80s, somewhere in that time frame, there was a big washout. And Boston and Maine and then Guilford later never repaired it. So really severed the line south of town. And really they just kept the service to these two industries. These two industries in town were the southernmost point of all the trains that came down from Hartford along this line. So our little itty-bitty footnote of railroad history right here in Cheshire. So, yeah.
If you want, you can share your screen.
That messed the whole thing up. So I'm just going to keep showing people what they can see here. So I know Kaylee's more advanced than me. She knew how to flip back and forth between sharing and not sharing. I'm gonna be a little more simple than Kaylee. Okay. But this is just basically the introduction. We're going to roll right into the division business. And then a little section Kaylee started on what you're working on the workbench. I know it's kind of hard in a socially distant environment, but I figure I popped a couple pictures up there. And we're going to take a brief break, and then we got two clinics. Art's got a clinic, and I've got a clinic, and we're going to go do those as well. Hopefully wrap up by 11, get the board meeting in, and then call it a day. All right? So first and foremost, I wanted to say farewell to Kaylee. Kaylee can't be here today. She actually has a family celebration she's doing today. If you didn't know, Kaylee was our superintendent and was one of the 3 board members. Technically, she is still one of the 3 board members, although she's already stepped down from the superintendent role. And the 3 of us, because I used to be a board member, agreed that I would be the board member who's the superintendent.
You still are?
And I still am. So what does that mean? We're going to take a nomination. We'll talk about it coming up for anybody who wants to replace Kaylee. So far, we have 1 volunteer, Art, who's here today, has volunteered to take that spot. And then we will vote on that in the April meeting to replace Kaylee. If you didn't know, this is like hardcore in my mind for a model railroader. Kaylee actually took a job in the industry in addition to her regular job as an engineer. So she's doubling down on model railroading. And she actually works for Rapido. And she is their North American warranty person and handles a lot of their repairs and processing of repairs stuff through there.
U.S., I believe.
Just U.S., not North America? Just U.S.?
I believe just U.S.
Okay. But neither here nor there. I've never had a job in the model railroading industry. Kaylee's got one now, so wish her the best of luck in her new role. And it's good to have her still in the division too. So I want to introduce myself. I put a couple slides together just to let you know who I am. I've been an NMRA member since 2009. I joined for the Hartford National Convention. I was giving a clinic in the prototype meet the year before, and they said, would you like to give a clinic at the National Convention? I said, sure. And I showed up, and I joined while I was there. I've been a member ever since. I am at the tail end of my first tour as a board of director member here at the Nutmeg, and have agreed to do another 3 years as well. I am, and the subtle advertising on the t-shirt today, I am a chassis system modeler, in particular the B&O part of the chassis system, circa 1982. Not a popular time to model, not even a popular railroad to model, especially in the Northeast. But I've been a B&O fan my entire life, and then been a Western Maryland fan, found out they're combined, and like the chassis system. It's been a great thing to do. I do maintain a website, have for 20 years. Hard to believe it's been 20 years. But that's the free website at trainweb.org. So if you have any interest in any other projects or anything, feel free to check that out. And I'm still the modeling editor at the Chassis System Historical Society, and have been doing that for a number of years. That is a shot of my layout. It's Martinsburg, West Virginia. I am happy to say I got my first ever cover of anything, ever. So I do write the Working on the Railroad Coupler column for the NER. And then our new editor, Chris, put actually one of my photos on the cover, which I think is super cool. My wife thinks I've reached, some plateau of craziness to have an actual magazine cover, but something that's in our basement. Just if you don't know, kind of hard to see with the screen here, but that yellow portion of the line is what I modeled. On the right-hand side, the easternmost point is the Point of Rocks through Brunswick, Harper's Ferry, up into Martinsburg, through what's called Miller there, or Cherry Run, and then Hancock, West Virginia. That is the very, very northern part of West Virginia. The other side of the river is Maryland right there. This is Hancock, West Virginia. This is Martinsburg, West Virginia as well. If anybody's ever seen the very famous dual roundhouses at Martinsburg, I think it's probably the only place that I know of in America that has two completely circular roundhouses. They are 100% enclosed, and they were next to each other. And if it wasn't for a bunch of vandals in the late 90s burning this one down, they both would be exactly the same as they were 100 years ago. But pretty cool to go to if you get to go there. A lot of history in Martinsburg, West Virginia. I am working on MMR as well. Luckily, have completed 4 of the 7 certificates. The top 2 are 2 of the cars I made for the cars one, and the bottom 3 are the locomotives I made for the motive power one. So, affectionately known as dinkies, these teeny little, they're the same locomotive, there's only one, but this was the 3 paint jobs it had, and it's 3 lives. And if you ever want to go see it, it's actually still at the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad Museum in Baltimore. It is an electric-powered locomotive, built in 1917. It's the oldest locomotive that was available on the chassis system. And also, as a weird footnote of all locomotives, it's the only one I've ever seen in my life that has a 5-digit road number. So, for some reason, number 15742. Who knows why they picked that number, but that's it. All right. So, oh, by the way, I'm going to sprinkle in the eye candy of the Cheshire Railroad photos the whole time. So if you're like, dude, what's the Cheshire? Yeah. So I found a lot of Cheshire, Connecticut pictures. This is the Conrail RS in the mid-1970s. Look at that. You got to ask yourself why you're even running that train, right? You got a locomotive and a caboose to run one car. So, somebody said Conrail was smart, right? The reason all those railroads were bankrupt before they became Conrail. And that's not a good business decision. But this is what we're going to go through in the division meeting. Try to cover kind of the same sort of things Kaylee did. After the meeting's over, if you have any input, things you want to change the way we're doing it, I think somebody who's on the phone needs to go on mute. Somebody's got a lot of background noise on there. Who's on the phone? Greg, if you can go on mute, appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
That's okay. So these are the kind of things that Kaylee covered. I'm putting it out there as a first time. If you want to see less or more, let me know. I'm more than happy to, adjust fire and do something different. Okay? These are things we're going to cover, though, as we get through this. General news. Anybody wants the Penn Central version of the same train as opposed to the Conrail one? I threw that one up there for you. Probably the most disappointing thing is the 2021 National NMRA Convention was canceled completely. It wasn't moved a year. They just nixed that one. So they kept the 2022 as originally scheduled. So, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that was in California, the 21 one. I think the 21 one was supposed to be in California. They nixed it. Probably not a big deal. Not a lot of us probably going to California for it, but they kept the convention schedule the same for all the out years. If you didn't know, national plans like 5 years in advance for these. So they just said, hey, sorry, tough luck, we canceled yours and on to the next place. Train shows are really being played month to month, year to year based on COVID, whether or not we're going to have any. The most recent one to us, the closest one that most of our members go to would be the Cheshire High School Band Show, which was here in town in Cheshire. It has already been canceled for March. So don't plan on going to that. They do that show twice a year, so there's another one in October, so hopefully by October they'll have that show back. But really it's just going to be an ongoing thing as we go through this. The good news is for the region-wise, the region decided to do these virtual conventions called NERXs, right? The virtual convention videos are on YouTube. It's a lot of footage. I think it's 16, 20 hours worth of content that they put up in a series of 4, 5, 6 videos. So I've watched a couple of them. They're pretty good. Our own Kaylee's on there, giving the Spotlight Awards each night, so she was on there as well. So that was kind of a substitute for canceling the 2020 convention. That's why they did this. So kind of think of that as what was the 2020 convention. They are planning a 2021 one in April. So it really will be the next big thing for us is April 10th and 11th. Not the convention, NERX. So there will be a virtual convention again at the regional level in April. The times are different than the last one. So I want to stress that. Last time they did it a couple hours each day for like 4 days in a row. Here they're going to do it 2 days, more hours per day, and it's a weekend. So the 10th and the 11th is Saturday and Sunday. As a matter of fact, we have one of our meetings planned that same morning of the 10th. So you can double down on model railroading on April 10th if you want. But 2 to 6 p.m., take a break for dinner, and then come back for the, I'm not going to be there for the 7 to 11 haul. I'll be straight up honest with you. I don't think I could make it to that. Our convention, though, regionally, did something different. Our 2020 Mill City Convention shifted a year. So we didn't cancel the Mill City Convention. We shifted it to 21. The dates are October 8th through the 11th of this year. I'm pretty optimistic that's going to be in person. Pretty optimistic that one's going to happen. I'm an optimistic person by nature, so maybe I'm going to be mistaken, but right now I think we're going to have that. What did that mean for us? If you didn't know, Nutmeg was next in line. So we shifted to 2022. And Ken May, who's our convention chairman, is really standing by to make sure this one doesn't move before he kicks off and gets serious and planning our 22 convention. Okay? So location, dates, name, all that stuff is TBD for the one we're going to host in 22. Just so you know, where do we stand? This is news to me, by the way, that I've learned since I was superintendent. I didn't know this. We have 174 members in the division. Throughout the Northeast region, we're actually the third largest, the 174 members. The region once a month gives us a download of what our membership looks like. Right now, it looks like there's about 12 people who were supposed to renew their membership December or January, and we won't know until we get another list whether you did it, right? But I would encourage you, if your membership is not current because you expired in December or January, please go online, renew your membership, and get that together. Obviously, we didn't have a December meeting. We canceled that because of COVID and losing our room there at Weathersfield. So we haven't signed up any new members since. We normally sign up members at things like trade shows and meetings like this. So without that, I'm not surprised we haven't had any new members. Another bit of eye candy still in Boston Main Paint Shop, 200, again, 1987. One of the oldest photos I found, by the way, of Cheshire Railroading. I think 94 was the oldest I found. Also, position-wise, if you didn't know who's here and who's not, I'm Jeff. I'm the superintendent. John's right here. John's the other board member with me right now. Kaylee, who you saw her picture on, is technically the third one. She's stepping down as of right now, which means so far Art, who's over here in the corner, is our volunteer to take that position, and we'll vote on that in April. Ron is here as well. Ron is the communications and membership lead. And then James Mayo, I didn't know if James, if you dialed in since I started, but James is our secretary and treasurer. I'd already talked about Ken May. He's our AP chair. Don, I didn't see Don on the screen already. Don's our layout coordinator. And we have 2 open positions, the clinic coordinator and social media I'll talk about in a second. I did want to let people know where we are on finances, and I want to know if anybody gets this joke. Does anybody get this joke? Who sees the irony in using this photo on the finance slide? That's a Penn Central caboose. Penn Central is the only time in American history that anybody who had bonds at labor grade A, which meant investment grade bonds, went bankrupt. So this was the absolute biggest surprise, if you didn't know, financial history-wise, in American history that Penn Central went bankrupt. People didn't see it coming, or they would have been downgrading the bonds as riskier and riskier, right? It still had the highest level bonds at the day it went bankrupt. Like, surprise! So finance-wise, I thought that was funny. We would put a Penn Central caboose on the finance slide. We do have a balance, very small balance, $2,700 is all this division has. We have no expenses and we have no donations. I would like to foot stomp one of our biggest income generating things is actually these meetings. So if people donate on the box on the way back, that's great, thank you. Also, we are considering an expense. We'll talk about it at the board meeting, but we're talking about possibly adding an email service that makes Ron's job a lot easier than he does today. So if you didn't know, Ron is an absolute trooper. I am shocked and awed, and I'll tell this story, and Ron's going to probably be embarrassed that I tell this story. Ron's email service only allows him to send an email to 100 people at a time, and he only allowed to do that once an hour. So for Ron to send the notification that you all got for this meeting took Ron 7 hours to send because we send this email to 650-some people. That's unbelievable. Like, we got to find a better way for Ron to do his work than to log on, wait an hour, log on, wait an hour, log on, wait an hour. It's just crap. So we'll find a better way to do it. We're looking at some things that are free, some things that have very small fees to see if we can make a better service to make it easier for everybody. All right. So communication-wise, I also want to stress something most people don't know. To me, this is baselining on how the division talks to you. Okay? We are streaming this right now. We are recording this right now. Eventually, this will go up on YouTube. Yep. So eventually, this will go up on YouTube. If you go to YouTube today on our Nutmeg channel, which looks like this, you'll see the June meeting and the August meeting are up there. We recorded the October meeting, but because one of the clinicians generally charges for that clinic, gave it to us for free, but he generally charges for that clinic, we have to go edit his section out before we can post it. So I just downloaded it. We'll cut off that part of the clinic, and then we'll post the rest of the video. So October will be up there. We had no meeting in December, so you'll never see a December video. This is the February one. We meet every other month, if you haven't noticed. Right? All the even months is when we meet. We do emails. We do send snail mail, if you didn't know that, to members who don't have an email. We still do send out a dozen or so letters of notifying people that this is coming out. This meeting is really the main part for us to talk about with the members. Anything you guys got, any questions, concerns, anything you think we should do better or worse, now's the time to talk about it. We do have a Facebook site that is frankly kind of stale. This is my problem and concern whenever we create a venue. If we want to go into a venue and we want to communicate through that venue, it's going to take work and time and effort, and somebody needs to like step up and do it. Which was why we were asking, Kaylee asked for first, that, like, I call it the social media position. The person that would make sure the announcements go out on Facebook and make sure the announcements go out. That's a big thing that we should be communicating with people. I'm amazed at how different everybody communicates, but we have people who do it all ways. We have people who don't have a computer, and we have people who want to know, why aren't we on Instagram, right? First of all, only my kids know how to use Instagram. I don't, so you're not going to get me Instagramming people, right? But we will do Facebook. We'll keep that page up. I did post an announcement for this meeting on Facebook. I'm not sure if anybody saw it. And we will post these videos to YouTube when they're done. The last thing I'll say is Dave Abrams, who was our webmaster, has agreed to let someone else be the webmaster. That's the website down there at the bottom. It's pretty stale. It's so stale it has the old logo on it. I think we've had this Nutmeg logo for probably 2 years at this point. So it's pretty stale. We're going to need somebody's out there who's savvy enough and understands how to update websites enough and wants to spend a little time giving us a refresh on the website. Please reach out to me or reach out to somebody on the board, and we'd be happy to get you the keys to the website and let you update. I talked about these a lot. I would like one thing I haven't pointed out about the layout coordinator and the clinic coordinator and the secretary. I'm sorry, I put layout coordinator on there. Don, you still have that job. Clinic coordinator is it's pretty much a marketing job, right? To do both layout and clinic coordinating. It's a marketing job. You gotta talk to people who are members, talk to people who are at trade shows, see if people can come visit their layouts, or if you see a clinic like NER regional, maybe they want to come do a Division I, right? I know personally I've done that. I've done a couple of clinics at the Metro North Division that they saw me do in the Northeast region, so they asked if I would come later and give it in person. So I drove out to Stanford or wherever it was. I did that a couple times. Secretary. Our treasurer and secretary is the same person. So, we're getting a little double dip in there. If someone wants to be the secretary, I'd be more than happy to, peel the two jobs apart. And then we talked about the board member. The last thing I'll talk about, once every 10 years, that's right, once every 10 years this happens. John gets to do this. John has volunteered to run the Constitution Committee for us. Get a little feedback.
Yeah, ask Dick Green to mute.
Dick Green. Dick Green, can you make sure you're on mute?
Okay, it's running out here.
Yeah, Dick, if you just go on mute, so you get some feedback, we can hear your background stuff. So, the Constitution Committee, I was going to ask if anybody would be interested to help John on this effort. So I printed it out. The Constitution is a page and a quarter. The bylaws are a page and a half. That's it. That's how long they are. Once every 10 years, we got to review not even 3 pieces of paper. Okay? So John has volunteered to do that. John's a lawyer by trade, so I hope he understands and work to that to the level we expect, so we don't put ourselves in a box. It does need to be consistent with the region and the national bylaws and constitution. Those date back to like the 1950s or 60s. You can see that every 10-year dates that they got approved. We're kicking this off right now for a reason, because we're going to give about 4 months to review the 3 pieces of paper. That's like 3/4 of a piece of paper a month. That's like 3 lines a week. Pretty easy to review. We will get to a point where we will have to, as a membership, after the board approves the changes, the general membership votes on the changes. So we're targeting for the June meeting to have all the changes up here to go through and to take. I'm not expecting wholesale changes to it, but I'll leave it up to John and his committee as to what they want to propose, and then the board will vote whether or not they accept those changes. Okay? Once every 10 years. Last time I'll have to talk about it, right? All right, new business. Oh, there's Country Lumber. Anybody like that's the Gilbert paint job of Boston and Maine? Anybody remember that one? It was short-lived. You can actually see the lumber. Lots of, what's really unusual about all these pictures I saw? Cheshire is an aside. how many Illinois Central and Gulf boxcars there were. They must have had an ICG customer. I mean, I bet 3/4 of the picture of ICG boxcars in Connecticut. I'm like, what? How is that possible? Anyway, and CNW too, so Chicago Northwestern as well. All right, I talked a little bit about the convention hosting. It's really going to be our major event. That's 18 months from now, roughly. So that's going to be our big deal. 18 months from now is to host a regional convention. We haven't hosted one in a long time, right? So I'm looking forward to that. On the calendar right now, the only train show that I have found that is not canceled, as of right now, as of the moment we're talking, is March 28th in Hudson, Massachusetts. This one is still planned. They call it a mini-meet. It's outdoors in March in Massachusetts. You may not want to go unless you have a parka and a hat. But they're literally going to do this outside. If you're interested, go Google NETCA Spring Outdoor Mini-Meet and go do it. They're talking about having vendors at the backs of their vans, right, in a parking lot. So they're going to try to do it safely as well, but it's just, gosh, that is going to be the coolest train show in the world if you want to go to it. We do have an April 10th division meet. I did talk about April 10th and 11th, the NERX virtual meet. That's all online, and that's all at night. So you can still come to this next meeting and then go do that. We do have a division meet in June and August already planned. There's where the Milk City Convention is, and then we got October and December. We do have one other new business thing we haven't talked about. The region just sent me an email. We have like about a month to get back to them on it. And that is if we want to nominate one of our members for the Spot Award, maybe the Spotty Award, maybe the Spotty Award. I'm not really sure how the gentleman pronounced his name, but the Spot Award, for lack of a better term, is really for someone who's gone above and beyond in the division and really kind of has really gone towards promoting model railroading around the region. If there's anybody who's interested to nominate, let me know, and we will nominate that person and put them forward. Okay? So Gailey started this little section of like what's on the workbench. I'm putting this out here just as a sampler. If anybody wants to, if we're going to have the next, I'm willing to bet the next meeting will be the same way as this meeting. I'm a realist. I'd love to say everybody's going to get their vaccine next week and everybody's going to be back to normal tomorrow. The reality is it's just not going to be that way. So come April, I'm willing to bet we'll have a meeting like this. So what I'd like to do is, if you're working on something and you want to share it, I'd really like to expand this section because we don't have a table here where everybody gets to see each other's work, right? We're not doing that during COVID, right? We don't have the white elephant table here, same reason, right? We don't even have refreshments here, same reason. So, but if you would like to share, if you've taken a picture of anything you've been working on, you'd like to share it, feel free to send it to one of us and we'll expand on this section, okay? So I put in here a couple of things that I finished. I did a recent, this former CNO, now BNO, because of course they traded GP9. You can recognize the CNO one because CNO ones had the bell like that on the front. Also, all BNO ones had the long hood forward, not the short hood forward. You can always tell whether or not it's what ends the front of the locomotive by the F on the side sill. And then I did find a guy. I didn't know anybody that ever make maintenance of way decals. There's a guy, you can find him on eBay. He makes maintenance of way decals. He makes a yellow decal for the door. I mean, it is like the head of a pin, this decal. But you can actually read it. I took the glass to go see it. So, Ron, you make sure you're on mute. Thanks. Is that you, Ron? Hutchins? Just make sure you're on mute. Thanks. And then, so I just did one of their maintenance away trucks. And then one of the other things I did is my layout room. I put the backdrops up. So that was a major pain in the butt. What I do about anybody who has had any success with backdrops, putting a backdrop up, because I put all these up, and then you can't avoid the bubbles eventually that come as the backdrop expands and contrasts as it changes the heat. So my furnace is right through this room, so it changes the temperature of the room easily. But those are the things I've been working on. Again, if you have something you want to share next time, please let me share. If anybody's been running on this trail, this is now the trail, exactly if you know where this is. But I put this up, I know most people up here like New Haven fans. This is the only one I found. New Haven skiing switcher. Switch it out. Those handguards are for the latex company there. Ron Hutchins, I still think you need to be on mute. You're getting a lot of background noise. Check to make sure you're on mute, please. So, can you mute him? Can I mute him?
You can mute.
Can you mute someone? All right, let's try to see if I can do that after this. This is the last slide. I don't have anything else for division business. I will open it up to the floor if anybody here wants to share anything before we break and start setting up for the clinics. Yep.
All the slides from Cheshire were being serviced from Bristol and
Yeah, north, yes. Yep. Came down through Southington, Kingston Town, and these places are kind of just a little bit to the west of downtown Cheshire.
we started renting our shop in 1978. So I was
Still using switchers. You see New Haven, you see Boston, Maine, you see Dover, Maine, and all that stuff. I'm going to see if I can do this. Try this. See how good I am. I don't know if I'm good enough to do this. Hey, Ron, can you hear me? I can mute myself.
He's asking for Ron. I don't know which Ron you want.
Ron Hutchins, you're making a lot of noise in the background. Doesn't have.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, you need to go on mute, Ron. Your microphone is making a lot of background noise for us.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. You want to go, Art? Do we care which who goes first on the clinics?
I don't care who goes first. Fine.
But no, I will say one other thing. I found more pictures than you saw here today. So if we have another meeting, I'll pop on more of them. And I did find one of the more interesting things in Cheshire, which I really didn't know until you start researching it, is we had a trolley line that actually crossed over this line. So a trolley line came from like Naugatuck and literally crossed this almost at a perfect right angle. If you go on the rails to trails right now, you know where the ball and socket is. If you go north of that, there's a Dillon and something lumber. There's a lumber place there. Just like 100 yards past that on the trail, you can still see the cement abutments and the pier in the middle. And because this is all run, by the way, it's called the canal line for a reason. It is actually run right next to the canal. It's the old towpath that was converted into a railroad. And the canal, although it hasn't been used in 100+ years, still exists in a couple of places. Lock 12 is still here in town if you want to go see what the locks look like. Can you imagine making a lock 12? This is lock 12. It's not the last lock. There's more than 12 locks, right? So more than 12 locks of making, oh my God. And they dug it by hand? Are they crazy? You guys are nuts. They dug it by hand through Cheshire. There's a sign that shows that guys built it. Unbelievable. So, but this canal line actually does get crossed by a trolley line in town. So you could have ridden the trolley back in the 20s or the 30s through Cheshire. So.
I should have two overnight crossings.
Two?
Yeah.
Well, that other one's a little farther down. You're right. That was a railroad crossing, right? Yeah. A lot of people, you know, kind of, there's little remnants here and there. If you go look for them, you can find them. I thought this was cool. This is neat. I always think that's like perfect model railroading, right? A switcher, a siding, 4 cars. Perfect. All right. Okay. Well, normally the clinician changes, but the clinician is me for the first one since Art said I can go first. So break. Hey, look. Hey, it's me. Welcome to the clinic. So So what we're going to go through today is, I thought if I was going to give a clinic, I'd give one that's probably broader appeal and more narrow appeal. I have ones that are very specific about chassis things and modeling chassis things. But this one really has the skills and the process I used to design my own layout, which may be helpful for you if you're working on one at home. I am working on one at home. There's a couple of things I did that I'll point out as I go that I'm really happy I did on the very start, which there's some things I did that were really bad when I started, which I'll also point out, right? Because this is a journey, let me tell you. Building a home layout's a journey. And unless you're building a switching layout that's 2 feet by 3 feet, it's a journey, right? So, also, by the way, there'll be a theme in everything I do, and that's gratuitous pictures of chassis system locomotives, right? I sprinkled in the New Haven, Cheshire ones on the previous one for you, but all my normal clinics just basically are about what I'm modeling, which is a chassis system. This is the Harpers Ferry, West Virginia Bridge, if anybody knows where that is. So if you actually can see through here, that's Maryland and the other side of the bridge as you go through. If anybody knows anything about this line that I'm modeling, it is one of the quirkiest historical anomalies that caused this railroad to look this way. I'll just say as background for everybody. The Chesapeake and Ohio Canal, not related to the railroad, the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal and the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad both started building to the west at the same time. They ran into a problem at Harpers Ferry. The problem was the shelf is so narrow on the Maryland side that both wouldn't fit. Up until this point, the railroad and the canal had shared their way through Maryland. When they got to Harpers Ferry, they went, oh, look how steep the mountains are. There's no room for a railroad and a canal on the Maryland side of the river. So they had a big court case, and the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad lost. The railroad lost, the canal won. So the canal kept digging on the Maryland side. So Baltimore and Ohio Railroad went to then the state of Virginia, because this was Virginia pre-Civil War, and said, can we build on your side of the river? We want to go to Cumberland, Maryland. They said, yeah, as long as you get back to Maryland less than 6 miles from Cumberland. So they crossed into West Virginia right here, across the river, on a huge bridge. They went just barely on the other side of the river, all the way to within 6 miles of Cumberland and cut back. So I model a railroad that starts in Maryland and ends in Maryland, and almost all of it's in West Virginia. This doesn't make sense, but that's the way it is. So, by the way, the state of West Virginia and the state of Virginia now have all the money and revenue from having this line, and Maryland has nothing because the C&O Canal is a ditch, right? Good choice. Maryland, you made the wrong choice. All right. So, we're going to talk about where to begin. We're going to talk about some early decisions. We're going to talk about things you must have, things you want to have. We'll talk about making a plan. We'll talk about executing the plan. And we'll talk about some hints and tips that I've learned along the way that hopefully will be useful for you. So just as background for myself, started with a box. Actually, my father gave me 5 or 6 shoebox full of trains that were HO scale trains. I did the standard thing where it's sectional track, right? I didn't realize track had a different radius. So you put the 18s with the 22s, or the 18s with the 22s, try to make a circle, right? All of those things. We had a grand old time setting them up every, Christmas time, putting them down. In 1997, my new, at the time, father-in-law, now not so new, father-in-law, I came across a basement propped up in his layout, his basement. And so I said, really, what's this? Oh, we started talking about it, we set it up, and anytime I'd go to my in-laws' house, we'd start working on it, and that's it. What was called the Wiley, Erickson, and Hankey line. It's a freelance little railroad. So we did that for about 10 years. And then I started in my own layout in 2003 here in Connecticut. But the first thing I wanted to encourage people to do is recognize you don't need to be ready in terms of having a space for a layout before you think about it. That's a concept most people may understand really obviously, but some people may not even think that. I started thinking about a layout before I even had a room for a layout. And I started with prototype research because you can model any way you want. But I started with the Baltimore, Ohio Museum, and I ordered track planes. This may be neat too, but you may have something similar on the railroads you're interested in. The chassis system found out that one of their engineers had hand-drawn the lines as a training aid for the new people who were coming on to work the line. So he had hand-drawn the maps of where all the sidings were, what they were named, what's the mile, all of that. And when management saw it, they paid him to go around the system and draw the lines. So I have drawn, in the early 80s, which is exactly the time I model, all of the railroad lines in my area. And he actually has books. This one is just my section of the line, but there's a book for almost every section of the line. So that's what it looks like here. You can kind of see what the graph looks like. Everything is, even the structures where the towers are marked. Like, it's a great research tool to help you, okay? I also researched things like what the motive power was, what the freight cars were, what the structures look like. Digitally, today, this is easier than ever. I cannot tell you how many times I print screen off of eBay when I see a slide. I've never bought a slide in my life. But I right-click on the digital image and save it. And I literally have accumulated over 25 years of thousands of images. Just because you might as well, because they'll help you sometime down the road. So I started first in half of my garage. My wife was really happy when we moved to our house, and the first thing I did is put a wall up in between the two-stall garage. And I claimed half of it and started putting a layout in and let her park in the other half. She cut the wall every time she opened her door into it. But this was my first attempt. Also something to note, everything you see in this picture is still being used in my current layout. I happened to be as a member of the Torrington Area Model Railroaders at the time. My kids are about this tall, so it was fun to go with them. They went to train shows. And they're a sectional layout, club. So the section, you bring it there, right? All modules, module. So that's actually how I learned how to build a layout. If nothing else, this is the #1 greatest move I ever made, was to build this layout like it was a modular layout. For 2 reasons. Number 1, it's very easy to work with the sections. I mean, I can do it all myself. Everything. It's no heavier than that table to pick it up and move around an 8-foot section. The other thing is, when I moved in 2014, I took it all with me. I haven't scrapped a thing. It's tragic to hear people go bandsawing their old layouts when they move house to house, right? So I moved the whole thing with me. But that's just where I started. Is just so you know. And today I'm working on. I've been 6 years in my current house, working on the east end as it is now, so it's obviously come along a lot farther than the previous picture. We'll talk about the rest of that. So where do you begin? First of all, you need to make the decisions of the big to small, right? Don't worry about right now, like, hey, where's the power line going to go? Or what sort of vehicle do I want to put on that scene? Those are little decisions. Don't worry about those things. Make the big decisions first, and then work your way down to where you have a finished product. You can't undo some of these decisions. Some of the decisions you make early will be very, very hard to reverse later, so you've got to make the right one at the beginning for what fits you and your needs. The other thing is, none of us, probably, I'm assuming, have a room this big to do a model railroad in, right? So most likely, you're going to have to compromise and balance between the things you want to do and the things that you can do. Space is always a problem, right? So it's a balance and a compromise as you go through and do this. So the first decision you really have to make is, do you really want to do this? Do you want to make a layout? And here's why. You should take stock of the things that you have. It's going to take wood, screws, wire, foam, tools, It's going to take all sorts of locomotives, freight cars, cabooses. It's going to take buildings. It's going to take a lot of stuff. Why do I put that up now? Because like I talked to you at the beginning, that you don't need to have a layout room to start. I started on a lot of these things before I had a layout room. I would make locomotives. I would make freight cars. I would make structures. I didn't have anywhere to put them, but I would go make them, and then I'd put them in a box. As a matter of fact, I have like 9 bins full of freight cars that are just ready to go. Just because you build them, put them away. Build them, put them away. Right? You also need to take stock of what you know how to do. And this is important because I think a lot of people believe they need to do the layout completely themselves. That's not true. Right? Carpentry skills, soldering skills, track laying skills, understanding your prototype, understanding operations, all of those things can come in time, but you need to recognize what you know and what you don't know because you may need to ask for help on some of these things to finish some of these projects. I tell you, I didn't understand operations one bit. I didn't understand operations at all. Beauty of YouTube, there's 738 videos out there for you on YouTube if you want to do railroad operations. You want to know what a car card system is? Trust me, there's 24 videos about what a car card system does if you want to watch them on YouTube today. It's never been so easy to get up and running in model railroad. Okay, so first thing you got to define is what sort of space you're going to have available. At this point, we're ready to start thinking about really doing this because you're going to make a plan. So the first thing you want to kind of think about is a plan. You can make a plan that says I have no limits. I got the Houston Astrodome to build it in, and this is what I would make it look like. Did anybody ever see the April of every model railroader has the joke one? Do you remember the Wisconsin Central one that was built 1-to-1 scale? Do you remember that? Like with no selective compression, the joke was the guy had golf carts and he delivered sandwiches to the operators, and he had a football stadium full of a layout and he drove everybody around to where they were. No compression. That was a great idea. Loved it. But most of us can't do that. That's why it's a joke in model railroad. How much time can you spend is important, but even more important to that, and I hope my wife never watches this video, is understanding how much it costs. You cannot underestimate. I talk about money a lot in model railroading in my clinics for a reason, because I don't think anybody does. Because I think it's an important factor in anything you do. My model railroading actually many times only proceeds at my budget. I only actually get progress on things that I already have in inventory and things I can go work on. It's workable work. I don't need to go buy something to continue that project. So money's a big factor. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it on that one. And then ask if you really want to do this, because I think some people want layouts, but they don't recognize what it's going to take to build it. And before you know it, you end up with a half-built set of lumber in your house that's not doing anything for years on end, right? And that may irritate your wife, that may irritate your kids if you got any, right? That may come to be a problem. All right? Okay, it's also a journey, not a race. I don't know of anybody who has finished a home layout in 6 months. It's going to take a while. It's going to take time because most of us usually have other things that are drawing on our time. That, you're not going to go down and spend 10 hours a day on your hobby. Probably going to spend something less. What do you like about the hobby is important to think about. What parts of this are going to be easy for you to get through, and what parts are you going to struggle to get through. And when you have those sort of struggles, you may need to ask for help. Time to phone a friend. I have been a program manager by trade, but there are also people who I call tinkerers who don't ever finish anything. Work a little on that, they work a little on this, they work a little on that, and they never finish it. And maybe that's okay. But if your goal is to finish a model railroader, you may need to think of this a little more programmatically, a little more, sequentially to get it done. And you got to really have your family support, right? My home layout takes half my basement up. My daughter lets me know more than once, probably a week. Like, hey, we're gonna move that layout. We're gonna get that out. We can make a cool room over there. Can we get that thing out of there? So you got to make sure you got support of your family doing such a thing, and to keep you irritated to that. So, assuming you're a go at this point, like NASA, you got the go, no-go decision. You're ready to go. Let's talk about making your plan. So, are you going to do a prototype layout or a freelance layout, or in between. So prototype would be based on something real, like Baltimore and Ohio in my case. Freelance is I dreamed it up, like the W, E, and H that we dreamed up on the first slides, or somewhere in between. In other words, I like the chassis system, but I'm going to make up my own layout. And I'm just going to use their motive power and their freight cars, but I'm going to, put the towns wherever I want, name them whatever I want. It's all up to you. The era. The era is very important. Transition era is still, to this day, the most numerous chosen era to do. People like periods of change because it gives you the flexibility to do both. Part of the reason I chose the chassis system was you had chassis system paint jobs, but then you had B&O paint jobs, and you had Western Maryland paint jobs, and you had C&O paint jobs, all together, normally. So you had a lot of wide variety, so it was a lot of interest. I watched a guy's video, and I don't know how you do this. The guy models the Norfolk and Western. Every locomotive is black and white. Every locomotive looks exactly the same. Every locomotive is just the road number difference. I'm like, well, why would you? I would be frustrated. Me personally, I just couldn't do it. Right? I like the variability and having something else to do. So, use more than one color of paint. Right? Black next, black with next. So you can't choose modern. Modern is actually coming on strong as an era for model railroaders to pick for their layouts. Technically, 1982 that I model is considered the modern era, right? There's no steam at that point, but it's not a popular time at all to choose. Modern being more like the 2000s and beyond is really growing in a lot of popularity, which I think speaks well for our hobby as well. People are picking those things, right? So that's good to see. And steam is still very popular. Everybody loves steam. It's kind of the classic locomotives, so there's still some steam people too. You got to make that choice for yourself. I'll tell you on a model railroad, diesels work really well and easy. Large steam is a little finicky on some of our model railroad sharp curves. So if you want to run the big boys from Union Pacific, 4884 that's a mile long, you're going to have a hard time usually in a normal size layout running a big locomotive like that. It's steam. All right, scale. HO's most popular scale by far, right? 187. I actually was corrected at one point. It's 187.3 because it's technically a millimeter conversion to an inch conversion, if you didn't know. N is 1/60th, 1 to 1/60th. O is basically twice the size of HO. S is, I think, 1/48. Z to me is amazing. Anybody who does a Z scale layout to me is phenomenal. I don't even know if I can get the wheels on the track, right? Let alone get it to look like something, but Z is the smallest of small scales. G is the big scale as well. And there's a whole bunch of them in between. So another thing to consider is you're going to do this by yourself. You're going to enlist a team of people to help. A lot of people have groups. They do sessions where people come, 4 or 5 guys come and go, third Tuesday of the month, we're going to work on the layout. They show up every third Tuesday of the month and they do it. That's fine. I've done mine all by myself. My kids have helped me periodically, onesie-twosie things like hanging the backdrops you saw in that picture. You can't hold a backdrop up by yourself when it's wet with glue on the back. So you got to go ask your kids to hold it up, and it smells like, you know what, terrible. You get high down there doing it, but it's great. You get to do that with your kids. And another thing is, it gets a bad rap in this industry, I don't know why, is hiring a pro to do this. If you have the money, but you don't have the time or the skills or the desire, or maybe physically you can't build a layout because one reason or another you don't have that mobility anymore, it's okay to hire a pro. I don't know why people badmouth the people will build your layout for you. You can literally go to places and get them to build a layout that will be built completely in another building, and it will be brought to you and set up in your basement. You can do that anywhere in the middle. And the location-wise, I picked a specific one. You can be generic like we talked about in the past. Okay. So that other things to think about. Single, double, or triple deck. I actually took 3 of my modules and briefly considered whether I could pull off a triple deck layout. No. Very, very hard to do. The lowest level is very low. The highest level is very high. I happen to be over 6 feet tall, so it's easy to see. But then again, most people aren't. The top level quickly becomes unusable. Permanent or built to move. I'll tell you right now, the house I live in Connecticut, not my last house. So I built this to move for a reason. And I'll show you how I did it. You want a duck under or not? I had a duck under in my first layout. I will tell you right now, as soon as I put the duck under in, progress slow. Just having that duck under, to have to go underneath to get into the layout room, I worked on it less because of the duck under. So I'm not a big fan of it. I'm trying to avoid it in my current layout. Is the room to be used for anything else? Mine is. Some people build a dedicated building. You can go to, carefreebuildings.com or whatever it is and buy a building that they'll come literally dump in your backyard, and you can have a training room building in your backyard, pre-built. If you got the funds for that, you want to do it, knock yourself out. Another thing to consider is whether you want your trains to be continuous, in other words, like running back on a circle, or point to point. In other words, it runs to one end and it can't turn around. Real layouts are point to point, real trains are point to point. They can't turn around because the track keeps going west or east, right? But there are opportunities to turn locomotives around. Turntables and Ys, you can turn things around on those sort of track features. But for home layouts, generally I think people try to get both. They recognize a point-to-point is the best way to do it because it looks the best, but they also want an option to turn the train around so that they don't have to handle the cars all the time, and if you have somebody just watching trains run, it can turn it around. And a reversing loop is usually the way to do that. Lighting is very important. My first one was in a garage with a single light bulb in the middle. Lighting stunk. I actually have a lot of lights now in my current one in the basement. I have floodlights. I've even added lights between the two levels so you can see the bottom level. Lighting is very important. More light in the better. The type of control means, are you going to use DCC, which is very popular today, or are you going to use standard DC, which is the old way of doing it? The old wiring on DC is a lot more complicated than DCC, but DCC is also more expensive because you got to put a decoder in every single locomotive. There are new dead rail concepts coming, but I wouldn't think that any of those is really mature enough right now to go put into a full-scale layout. But basically, a dead rail layout means you're no longer sending power through the rails themselves to communicate to the locomotives. You are actually remote controlling the signals, and the locomotive has a battery in it, whatever it needs to move itself. I would guess 20 years from now, 25 years from now, that will be the norm. But right now, today, it's not there yet. I think most people believe DCC is the best way to do things today in terms of operational flexibility because you can run multiple trains on the same track at the same time. Radius of the curve, another thing to consider, the minimum radius of your curve. I do 30-inch radius on the main line is the minimum, 24-inch minimum on the sidings. Minimum turnout number. This is, if you don't know what a turnout number is, turnout is how much it diverges. The higher, of course, the higher the number, the less it diverges. Makes sense, right? No, it doesn't. So a 4 diverges much quicker than a 6 or an 8 or a 10. The 10 barely diverges. Why is that important? That's important because when you design your layout, the longer the number, the higher the number, the longer the turnout physically is. So a number 4 turnout is about 7, 8 inches long, I would guess. The number 6 is probably about 11 inches long. Number 8 is probably like 15 inches long. So that's a big thing to deal with, 1.5 feet worth of track that's straight. Okay? Track brand, I use Atlas. I use some Pico. You know, some people like different brands. Generally speaking, you know, they're all good. Microengineering is really hard to bend if you're using FlexTrack for microengineering. Some people like the snap switches, like the Pico ones snap back and forth on the turnout. In other words, there's a spring that's holding it open. Atlas doesn't do that, so it's a little more at risk to derail on an Atlas. Train siding length, if you're going to run a train, how long is it going to be? Because you're going to want your sidings to be that same length at least. Otherwise, the train can fit the siding. Why do you have it? Right? Underneath the track, I use cork for sub-road bed. So under all that ballast is a little thing of cork. Some people use foam. I bought some foam. They say the foam's better for sound. Doesn't relay the sound as much. I've not noticed the difference between using the two. Underneath that, what are you going to use? Plywood or foam. I actually have, this is a 2-inch pink foam. I know I painted it so you can't tell. This is 2-inch pink foam on on top of the wood. Some people just put plywood there. It's up to you. Plywood's much more rigid, but plywood is also much heavier. Plywood also doesn't sculpt. So if you put it on the 2-inch pink foam, you can make your contours of the landforms a lot easier, which is why I do it. In benchwork type construction, my benchwork is simply squares of wood with horizontal ones for every time there's a bracket holding it to the wall. I drill 3 holes in it so that the wires can run through it and not go underneath, and then I just glue the 2-inch foam on top of it. Some people prefer the spline road bed where you put it all together and you cut all these pieces, and I'm just like, wow, that's way too much work. It makes for beautiful curves. It makes for really good small changes in grade and stuff. If you want to do it, it looks amazing. But to me, it's got to be 10 times the amount of work to get it done. So that's why I don't do it. So, first thing we're going to choose is what's the area we're looking at and what are we going to model versus what we're not going to model. So I made this cool little map. I would suggest you do the same thing if you're going to try to do a prototype railroad. These are mile markers from 77 all the way to 171. So this is the east end. This is the part I model Cumberland subdivision. And then what happens on every mile? There's a turnout, there's a crossing, whatever, all the way. Then you can really quickly see what's interesting and what's not, and then what to model and what you shouldn't. Okay? I also think probably, just as another footnote, I think this is probably the only section of railroad in America that doesn't use every mile marker. The B&O shortened the line by doing tunnels and bridges. But since these mile markers were already there and these mile markers were already there, when they got rid of all the extra mileage, they don't use today number 149 and 155. Those 6 miles are gone on the actual line. So it's also the only place in America that you can see through a state. Baltimore, Ohio built a bridge from West Virginia into a peninsula of Maryland, bored straight through it, and put another bridge back into West Virginia. So you literally could stand in West Virginia, look through Maryland, and see West Virginia. It's the only place you can do that in the country. Pretty cool.
Where is that, Jeff?
That's called the Magnolia Cut. So there's 4 tunnels there and bridges to make it all. And it's really interesting. Near Paw Paw, West Virginia. Great name. So I started with a list of the things that I wanted on my model railroader, the things I call must-haves. First of all, I wanted it to be recognizable as the place I was modeling, and I wanted to have a yard on each end where you keep all those cars. To me, that made the most sense, right? Some people say they want a staging yard on each end. I actually just wanted the yard itself on each end. That's Brunswick in the bottom left. They did have a roundhouse during the Chesapeake era. This is Cumberland. And then 2 main areas of interest in the middle. Hancock, this is Hancock, West Virginia. And this is those 2 roundhouses I was talking about in Lawrenceburg, West Virginia. And then this is really a very high traffic double mainline area, but I did want to have a little bit of switching, and so I wanted to have Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, which actually breaks off right there from Hancock. It has a major sand plant still there today. If you want to know where most of the sand for your glass and that kind of thing comes from, Berkeley Springs, West Virginia has a U.S. silica plant. It's probably the largest one in the United States for doing sand. Definitely the largest one on the east side of the United States for making sand, high quality sand. In terms of making it recognizable, I wanted to make sure it had the Harpers Ferry, West Virginia bridge. This is it. So this is the Maryland side. This is also one of the only turnouts in a tunnel. They actually connect in the tunnel in Harpers Ferry, which is a little unusual. This is actually the 2nd bridge at Harpers Ferry. This is the 3rd bridge at Harpers Ferry. The first one, you can see the pilings in the river. Every 40, 50 years, the river takes the bridge back, right? So today, thanks a lot, has a huge flood and washes the bridge. But that's Harpers Ferry. So I wanted to have that on my lap. Tried no duck under, good lighting. Wide aisles. I don't know how many people have gone to operate at someone's layout, and they built the layout so that it's 12 inches of an aisle. I'm not getting any skinnier. You should plan everything to have for 2 big people passing each other like ships in the night. Your aisles really should not be more narrow than like 30 inches. Would be a good number to keep. 24 is doable. Anything under 18 starts to get uncomfortable. And if you got to turn sideways to get through the gap that you designed in your model layout, I guarantee you there will be damage on both sides of that part of the layout. Guaranteed. That's just human behavior. Okay? Climate control, although I have it in my basement, it is still flexible. The gaps in the track are still different throughout the year where the sections join. That's New England. I'm not going to solve New England. You just got to learn to deal with it. And I like to put the bottom level at like a chair height, so that like literally if anybody came with, maybe they're in a wheelchair or they can't stand, they could still operate the layout. And we could just put a chair there and let them run the trains. So that's a little low for some people. Some people don't want to have the lower level that low, but I like to have it that way. It also gives me a bigger gap between that one and the first one. Okay, we've passed from need to have to want to have. These are things that I thought would be nice. I got some of these in my plan, some of these I don't. In Green Spring, not to be confused with Berkeley Springs, which we just talked about, Green Spring, West Virginia, the South Branch Valley Railroad connects there, but they also have a tie plant there, which I thought was the coolest. Like, this is literally the neatest thing next to a railroad you could probably do. You could actually model this if you really wanted to. You could just go by the ties and do this, but they season the wood. They basically leave those ties out there for years to put creosote on. So that's what all those are for. I just thought that would be neat. We also need industry to switch. I tried to avoid a helix. I didn't. Tried to avoid a helix. I didn't put valence lighting in because, frankly, I already had a finished ceiling in the room I went in, so I didn't do that. I did get under layout storage. That's important. You got to have a place to put things. If you're anything like me, you're going to have those Christmas decorations boxes you need someplace to put, right, where you're going to put the Halloween stuff. You just made a massive counter all the way around the room to store things underneath. Easy for operations. One of the things that I've always been frustrated with when I've operated anybody's layout is when you go in, you can't understand it. It's frustrating to me. I don't know if it's frustrating to anybody else who's done any model railroading, but so I made this rule. When you walk in, west has to be to the left, east has to be to the right. You have to be looking north. That's the way we think. Most people think that way. It is very confusing if it's inverted. And you say, oh, I want to go east and it's left. Most people think east is right because you're used to looking at a map with the north at the upper part of the map. So my whole layout is that way. Anywhere you look in the layout, when you stand and look at the layout, east is to the right, west is to the left. North is on the backdrop, you're south of the mainland. So it feels comfortable to do that. I also did not put signals in here. You want to take your layout to a whole new level. I'm talking about spending 25% more on your layout than you spent to make it actually run and look good. Go buy signals. Signals are expensive. Signals are complicated. Signals require a lot of wiring. You got to have block detection. You got to understand occupancy of blocks. It's real money to go put signals in. I also didn't light any of my structures. I didn't put LEDs in any of them. I figured if you wanted to go model railroad in the dark, I'll just turn the light switch on, right? So I didn't spend any time doing that. A lot of people like doing that, putting lights inside their structures. I didn't do any of that because I figured it's time. All right, so let's talk about making the plan. Boom, you're ready now. I've done all these decisions, Jeff. I don't have a plan yet. Man, why haven't you got me a plan yet? Well, here it is. I should say I brought a layout outline if anybody wants to who's actually physically here. We can do it. So I'm going to make a plan that is so simple you could do it anywhere. And I did make mine anywhere. I made mine while I was traveling for work. I made mine, you know, at night at the kitchen room table, anywhere you want. You can make this plan. It's a graph paper plan. And you start first with what I call a placement plan, and then you do a detail plan. Okay? So this is probably the best $5 I've ever spent in model railroading. They sell these all over the place. Micro Mart, I think, sells this. I know who made this one, I could tell you. CTT Incorporated in Dallas, Texas made this one. That's a picture of it right there. I took a Sharpie to my two most common arcs so I didn't have to worry about it. So the red is 24. I told you that was the minimum one for the siding. The blue is 30. That's the one for the main lines. So it's really easy to see when you're using it. Okay? And this is done with a pencil. Just on a pencil and graphic. Nothing else. No computer program. Not learning how to click on a computer program, not learning how to bend it, not learning how to drop in, turn out, not doing any of that. Don't need it. Right? I have fiddled around with some. Some people said, oh, try this one, and I looked at them. And learning curves like this, don't have time for it. Don't want it. So start first with the placement plan. And this is actually the original, if I can see that on the TV there. This is what the placement plan looks like. It's the shape of my room with a foot equals each square. Okay? And why did I do that? I made lots of copies of it. Because at first you want to do the big pieces. Right? You want to say, oh, I want Hancock to be here, and Martinsburg to be here, and Cumberland to be here. And you want to start playing with it. Just thinking about it. And so you just draw them. So here are some of the examples of ones I drew. Just where I thought things should go. Where should the towns be? Where should the industries be? How much space for each area? I'm doing a double-decker layout. Try to avoid, and I didn't, try to avoid as much as possible putting the two big operating areas on top of each other. Because people are going to be using them standing side by side there. It's kind of unavoidable sometimes. You know, there's ways to work around it, but that's something you're trying to avoid. But that's what these are. These are just a series of plans. So I made, and just show you as a site, this is just some of the ones I made as I was doing. Just having fun, seeing what worked, what didn't work, just try it. Some of those I was doing when I was getting a master's degree, and I would just sit there in class and do them and work on, hey, where do you think Cumberland should go? And I'm not listening to the guy who actually was talking, so it's probably not a good thing to admit to publicly, but that's how I got through my MBA. So then comes the detailed plan. So now you kind of know where towns are going to be, you kind of know where things are going to be. Now it comes time to really get serious. And that's where this little thing comes in handy. And these detailed plans, when you buy 1/4-inch square graph paper, which is exactly what this tablet is. By the way, this tablet's probably 15 years old, right? So this entire layout plan costs you $10, right? That's just, you have 1/4 of a foot, or 3 inches, for each square. It matches this exactly. Perfectly. This is actually set up to be used on 1/4-inch graph paper. And each foot is 4 squares. So I just draw the outline of how big my benchwork's going to be, and then use this to draw. It's got everything in here. I don't know if you can see that. I'm seeing people on can see that. But it's got the turnout shapes, as well as the curves. It's got length of flex track, about how long 36 inches of flex track is. It's got everything you need on this thing. And you just draw what you want. And I was banging that off of the map that I had from the Oakmore, Ohio Museum, and this to come up with my plan. What worked and what doesn't work. And I'll tell you right now, yards eat space like you wouldn't believe. You really need to think about your yards first. The yards are the real estate. A ladder, you just start over here where it starts. 1 foot, 2 feet, 3 feet. It's 3.5 feet before the tracks are separated in like a 5-track yard. 3.5 feet, that's a long way on most of our layouts. So that's something to think about. Here's another beauty of doing it this way. You don't like this one? Next piece of paper. Do it again. And if you looked in mine, there's multiple versions of certain areas, because I just say, that doesn't work, try again. Nah, that doesn't work, try again. And by the way, you know, I would even work on it like when the airplane was taxiing out and I was traveling for work, right? You just sit there and draw on your lap, and I got my template, and you just bang out a drawing while you're doing it, right? What else are you going to do? Listen to them going, you know, seats are here, the seats are there, right? All right. So let's talk about executing the plan, because now I'm assuming that you've done this for whatever you're going to model. You've already got it complete, okay? You've already done a detailed plan. So there's a couple of theories on how to do this. I love the people who say, I'm going to do this area 100% complete. What was it, was it Franklin and Worcester, or whatever that was, that guy's name, George Sulios, or whatever his name was? He just started at one end of his layout and made it look like a museum all the way around the room. He literally didn't even do the part behind him. He started in one corner and turned it into a museum piece as he went. That's a great way to do it. But keep in mind, you're not going to be able to run a train that way, because there's no other track. You know, you're only working on a 4-foot section. There's nothing else. So it looks great when you're done. It looks really finished, but it's not usable. Then you have the other people who I've seen. There's a great YouTube video. If you haven't seen it, you should go see it. Guy's making a layout above his garage, and he turns the YouTube video on, and he runs it at, you know, high speed. He shows you how he's working, and he literally goes around and does one step through the whole layout. One step. I'm going to do the bench work. He makes all the bench work. I'm going to lay the track. Lays all the track. He does one step the whole way through the layout. That has its pros and cons too, right? You should think about that. Number one, it's the quickest way to get a train up and running. You will have the entire layout laid. You'll have everything ready to go, and you'll have something that you can run. However, you also have that terrible look of just plywood everywhere, and it looks like a construction site. It is a little neater, right, to do it that way. Like, for example, I didn't know how George would ever do his when he's like, okay, back here I'm doing something messy. Isn't it putting dust on the part I just finished, right? We can't stand plaster over here without getting dust somewhere else in the same room. It's impossible, right? So it's up to you which one you want to do. Here's how I do it. I straddle the fence. So I make a section, and I do this in my garage. Put the wood together in my garage. Garage is a large, flat piece of concrete. I glue this on the top. Then I can sculpt and lay the track and all that stuff. Anything that's messy, where I'm sanding, plaster, any of that stuff, isn't even in the room that the layout's in. I do it in my garage. The sections are almost every one of my sections is only 6 feet long, because you buy 6 feet long pieces of wood, right? You can just go to Home Depot and get a 6-foot piece of wood. Don't cut it. I make it 2 feet wide. Why? Because the foam comes 2 feet wide. I don't have to cut it, right? It's just quick to make. Then it keeps all the mess in the garage. So I'm not sanding anything in my actual layout room. I'm not making dust in my layout room. And then I'll bring that thing down. What I'll do is, before I bring it down, I call it the texture state. Before I bring it down, I'll paint it, and while the paint is wet, I have 2 colors of paint, gray and brown. I paint gray, and I sprinkle it with stone dust. Stone dust is the stuff you put under pavers. You ever see a paver sidewalk or a paver driveway? Stone dust is amazingly great stuff. The guy here at Cheshire Stoneworks will sell you a bucket of it for $5. You'll never use a bucket in your life. You get 1 lifetime's worth of driveways and gravel roads for $5, right? Don't buy anything from Woodland Scenics, because you're going to pay $40 for a bottle, right? So, and this is just sifted dirt. For the brown stuff, I'll put brown paint on it, and I'll just sift dirt on it. And that sifted dirt will stick to the wet paint, and it provides like a textured look, and it provides a great underline for all other scenery that you put on top of it. So it looks very brown, and it's kind of rough because it's dirt. The single greatest part of getting dirt in New England is the Department of Transportation will bring it to your garage for free in terms of all the snow that melts off your wife's car, right? You will have all the dirt you ever needed in your garage. Sweep it up. We have a wicker mat that is the best sifter in the world. Every time I pick the wicker mat up to clean the garage, you just save all that stuff. And it ends up on my layout for free. All of it. I have bags full of it. I just have bags full of Ziploc bags, gallon-sized bags of dirt, because they're great. They're perfect. They're ready to go. Use it. All right? And then your layout's in a state that you can actually do stuff with it. Okay? So, as you continue to execute this plan, at least for me, one of the things that's really helped is early victories. Getting things like the first train to run. Big deal. Like, it's good to see. Like, do what you need to do to just hook up two wires and see a locomotive go back and forth. Makes you feel like you've done something. Another thing while executing the plan, if you're like me, there are certain days where you are ready to do a complicated, long, hard project, and there are days you don't even feel like you're in the mood for that at all. You don't want to do that one bit. You just want to go down and do something small, easy, quick, and fun. That's when I say, do what you can do when you can do it. If you have 10 or 15 minutes is all you have, go down and do something quick and easy on the layout and keep it progressive. You may not have 5 or 10 hours to go work on a big, huge project. That's fine. Just go and chip away at something. Maybe it's putting a phone booth in, right? Like, oh, I always want to detail that phone booth. I'll go put that in. It's not really needed to keep things moving, but it's a little project that makes you feel better to get it done. Go make the phone booth and put it in there. Whatever it is, up to you. Another thing I would suggest, and this is huge, please practice new skills before you do them on the actual layout. Practice them. Okay? Soldering's a big one. If you're not good with a soldering iron, you're going to be melting ties on 3-foot pieces of flex track you just glued down. And you're going to be going, oh God, now what do I do? Because I've made a big blob of flat. Okay? Cutting foam. The reason I do it in the garage, this is a true story, is I bought the hot blade to cut foam, and I said, I'm going to try to cut my first mounts with this hot knife thing, this big, huge hot blade thing you buy from like Micro Marts. It smells so bad when you cut foam with this thing. People who are, I'm in the basement, and I have a 2-story house. The people in my son and daughter on the upper level are complaining about how it smells from the basement. It is awful. You should never cut foam inside your house. Every single piece of foam I cut from here on out after that first sample is done outside for that reason. So just keep in mind that there's a lot of these skills you want to try before you do them for real. Okay. Also, I'm amazed at how many people are scared to try something new. You should never be scared to try something new. Constantly experiment. This is the beauty of doing it in sections like I do. Each section has gotten better. So I did a section, I'm like, whoa, do it a little different. Next one. I'll tell you some of the mistakes I made early on. The Hancock section. I did not put the turnout motors in the foam before I laid the track on top. I didn't even think about that. I drilled a hole so that I thought the rod would go through. I didn't think that the switch machine would need something to attach to so that it could torque the little rod back and forth. Mistake. The best way to do it, and one of my pictures may have it, is to put a little 4-inch by 4-inch piece of fascia board and mount the turnout motor to the bottom of that, and then drop that in from the top of the foam. Cut a hole in it and drop it in so that it sits at the foam level. It's already secured. It's good to go. I don't know if I have a picture of that. I don't think I have a picture of it. But anyway, all of the turnouts now I build with that turnout motor mounted from the top of the phone and the track lays on top of it. Night and day difference. Because I had to go back to the Hancock section and put in 12 switch motors from the bottom, which was a nightmare of all time. So you learn as you go. So making little sections is better that way. You learn how to do things better. Another thing, if you notice in this picture, this is the same picture that I started with the where you saw both roundhouses. You notice that backdrop's not in this picture? I didn't put the backdrop in when I hung this thing on the wall. What were they thinking? Start with the backdrop. The backdrop, by the way, did you remember the picture I showed earlier on in the brief about I laid the backdrops in that section that doesn't have the layout with it yet? I've learned. Put the backdrop in first. I actually found out how to put the backdrop into this while this was up on the wall. What a pain. But we made it happen. But that made it much harder. Wiring. Another thing I do now, again, with sections is better. I put all the wiring in that section before it goes on the wall. I literally will turn it on its side on sawhorses. And like this, ergonomically, put the wires in underneath. I am not doing this anymore. I'm not laying on my back underneath the layout doing this. How many of us have done that and got out there? God, you kidding me? This stinks. I hate this. Right? No. I'm taking the sections. I have them up at 90 degrees, clamped onto sawhorses, and I run the wires underneath it ergonomically. Both ends have like barrier blocks, or whatever they call them, the connectors, little screws. And so each of my sections literally connects to each other. All of this is also done for another reason. Because I'm going to pick this thing up out of Connecticut and move it to wherever I'm moving to next, right? And then move it to my next house and set it up there. So it's got to be moved. All good things to do when you're executing plans. I think it's my last slide. Progress will shift between fast and slow. There are times you will jam and go crazy and do great things, but you also have to recognize there are times where progress is going to be slow, and that's okay. Right? You just got to stick with it. Any progress is good. Okay? Don't forget to ask for help. There's many of these things that I haven't known how to do, and I have asked people who own layouts already. And I've said, hey, how did you do that? No, how'd you do that? How did you get over this obstacle? Those kind of things come to you. That's where I got the idea of putting the switch motors in before, unfortunately I already had like 20 feet of layout built before I realized you can put them in from the top. So, all good stuff. Plan early, plan often. When you make an actual plan, you're not going to be surprised. It'll fit. That template works. When you make a plan, I use that plan on the actual foam and draw it out, just like on a piece of paper. Oh, yeah, that turnout's 3 inches up from here and 6 inches to the left. That's where it sits. Put it there. That kind of thing. In the ask for help category, here's a good one for you. Something most people probably haven't thought about. The guy at Rusty Stumps is the name of his company, Rusty Stumps. I happened to notice that he did laser cut windows. Lots of them. And I emailed the guy and I said, hey, if I have a window, would you make it? And he goes, sure. What does it look like? And I sent him the pictures, and I sent him the dimensions, and he made all the windows for the Hancock passenger station for me. There is no way I was going to get anywhere close to this with anything else that was on the market. There's nothing even close. The guy made them for me at no additional cost. He's like, yeah, I'll make them. It's a product on his website. You can actually buy it now. He did the work for me. And I bought a couple sets in case I screw any of them up. Unbelievable. Like some of these like things that you think of are a roadblock aren't a roadblock at all. There's a way to overcome them real quick. Before I open for questions, I'll say do your research. I was really worried I was going to have to model that building. That is the Brunswick YMCA, which is where all the crews would go to spend the night when they were, staying overnight in Brunswick. Luckily, it burned down in like 1978. Model 1982, it was a green field by then. Imagine cutting all the windows in that thing. Gosh. Look at the air conditioning. Window unit, like everywhere from the top. So, that's what I've done to do planning and the layout. Another good thing is when you do it by sections, you don't have to plan the whole entire thing like I did. You could just plan a section at a time if you'd like. So it's kind of nice to scale it up and scale it down. So I've had good things. One thing the brief didn't mention that I also tried to do in my design, this is like upper level stuff if you want to try to do it. Some places I tried to make it so that the tracks was exactly parallel to the front, so that if I moved to the next house, those two sections could move apart and fit the new room. And I'll just have to build a little 2-foot, 3-foot section in the middle to make it fit the new room, right? You can't do that if the tracks go diagonally, because when you separate them, you'd have to offset the two pieces. But if you have them perfectly parallel to the front, you can actually kind of accordion your layout if you went to a different room. I may need that, I may not. I did that sometimes in some places. Any questions? No? Okay, good. Anybody else notice the variation in the paint schemes of the two locomotives in the photo book, or is it just me? There's a B&O one down here. So this is the old scheme. This is the chassis scheme. All right. Art, I think you're up. I'm going to pull up your brief, and then start. You want to take a little break? All right, everybody online, we're going to take like 5 minutes while we queue up Art's thing and get going here. Ooh.
It's amazing how many little tricks things you learn during the construction of layouts. Unbelievable. I had a huge forest machine, and a neat little trick is a pain in the neck, especially typically if you work from your even established layout. Is I get rid of the wire, basic wire, I go to like one size heavier. And I take a full length, 12 inches or so. Put my little band in, put it in this groove, and I've got this long whip antenna like thing. Poke it up through the center of the switch machine, take one of those cleaning taps, and position it on the wire. I move it up, and while you're still able to maneuver it, because it hasn't set up yet, find my center. You know, I've already moved the switch motor, so I'm on center. Move it around until you're where you want to be. Just hold it just for a second or two until the hot melt sets up. Move the clamp down, and the clamp will keep the machine from falling down. When you're done, you just hit it with the Dremel cutoff side. It works really good. Really good.
I use
I've already got my pigtail soldered on for, you know, powering up the frog and whatnot.
I use like liquid nails.
Okay.
Or Gorilla Glue.
Yep.
On the little square. When I had to go from the bottom. Took that blade thing outside and carved the square from underneath on the phone.
Okay, I was wondering how you did that.
Yeah, and it, but the wire has to be closer to the turner. It can't be. And we couldn't have the top of the switch motor being through 2 inches of foam.
Right.
So what I did is I dug a hole in the foam.
Okay.
On the bottom. Yep. And then it's only about a ½ inch or a ¼ inch thick foam underneath the turnout. But I stuck it in there with that same facial board. Right. Glued it with liquid nails.
Okay.
And then had to make sure you have the reverse motor vertically in the middle. And then make sure the turnout motor is right. The turnout itself is not thrown either way.
Right.
And then you got to look the other way, like you said, 90 degrees, make sure that it's not, yep, got to want it this way either. Yep. Then there's enough adhesive. When it's even staying on the side like this, like it almost on the side, it'll hold its position. Well, sometimes I stick a piece of foam underneath it to make sure it doesn't move.
Right.
But then you try it. Good. I think that.
I hate that stuff. Hate it. Right now, I'm putting a couple more switch motors in. I leave those to showing how it turns out. They don't block. Well, I've got a couple of the other switch. The whole little spring. It's an off-center spring, so it'll stay on either point.
Those are good. I used to keep it that way.
Yeah, and they give you a good contact too if you're relying on continuity from that rail.
I'm actually using more of them lately than the Atlas ones because of that.
Yep. And I just read somewhere that Heron will design change their turnouts. They're not hinging point rails anymore. Yeah. And years ago, TrueScale, I think, was doing stuff along that line. Or actually, they had a pivot point. Those rails turned, and actually, they closed the spot.
But if it goes too many times, isn't that like just general metal fatigue? Like eventually you do it, eventually everything.
Yeah, but
you just don't have
oh, you're well done. They've been. And they have more balance fatigue problems than we do, that's for sure. They're 100 pounds per car. Yeah, they get hit with a few hundred tons every time the weight goes over, so yeah, they're going to have more balance fatigue issues. They're interesting little tidbit. The Berlin Railroad Station. On the west side, there used to be a turning Y that came from the bridge going to the pavement. Of course, we're looking north towards Hartford. But it was taken out years and years ago. There was an old icing plant there on the west side of the Draft Berlin platform. Looking lot. It was a big icing facility. And they used to block ice. Oh, and that came down. The sidings are still there, actually, believe it or not. But the connector from Madrid to the Haven was taken out. Just got it back then. Yeah. And it get installed, and they put up a new turnout. Because now, if you come out of Plainfield and want to go to Hartford, they used to be able to go through Newington, but for some reason or another, the powers didn't use that route. They came down to Berlin, and they did a loop. Really tightly, you want to hear some wheels squealing. They're going around that curve, and it's tight. I don't know what it is in degrees, and then they go north to Hartford. So basically, they've got this big loop, the north curve section of a Y, and they decided, hey, yeah, put that old leg back in for the David. So now there's actually a loop. If they want, they're still going there. They put this leg back in, they cut in a new switch, like New Haven, and they've got an automatic derail. So when CTC turns that switch on to use it, the derail comes off the track. Yeah, if anyone wants to go take a look at it, you can go up there and see it easily from the station property. But if you wanted to check it out, there's a heat treating plant. Near the Dairy Queen, there's like a road that goes right up and we go out up there and see it. In fact, they haven't even finished ballasting it yet. They ran a couple of tires through there, but they haven't put any equipment in to smooth it off or to grade it off. Okay. Art?
Yep.
You ready?
I think I'm ready.
And just so you want to know, Art, you stand over here.
Yep.
You'll see here what they're seeing. Yep. So you stand right about there. They can see you, and they can see the notification.
Nice.
Down arrow. I was using the down arrow. Okay.
Okay. You good? Yep, we're good.
Is your mic still on?
Yeah, it's all right. You did.
All right. How's everybody doing this afternoon? Put this one together pretty quick because we needed that second clinic. So we're going to give it a go here. My name's Art Dutra. I live not too far away down in South Meriden, so it's a quick ride up here. Been model railroading most of my life. Like a lot of people, my earliest memories were probably about 5 years old. Like a lot of families, you know, the family would get together for Sunday dinners all the time. And when you're a little kid, you kind of get bored listening to the parents talk about, and the grandparents talk about family things. So I would invariably wander my way up to my grandfather's attic and found his and my father's Lionel sets and tin plate stuff. And I would spend hours up there just playing with their tin plate stuff until it was time to go down for Sunday dinner. About high school, I got afflicted with the narrow gauge bug. Just something about the narrow gauge modeling and the narrow gauge railroad just really struck me. I've told a lot of people I don't think I've ever seen a narrow gauge locomotive that I don't consider to be very elegant, and it just struck a chord. So that's where my modern modeling went into from there. I joined the NMRA, I think permanently in '93. I had to check my card again now. Been a member ever since. Haven't been really active at the local division, mostly been lone wolfing because, again, family gets in the way between education, raising the family. But now I've got more time and I'm trying to get back into it again. As Jeff mentioned, I volunteered to sit on the board here. I've been on the board for two other organizations at this point. I sit on the board for a ski club that I'm a member of with my wife. We're very active skiers. And I was also founder and sat on the board for many years for a nonprofit down South Meriden, or in Meriden, for a high school robotics program that all three of my children went through when they were in school. And I now have 2 engineers and a machinist, so they all have great careers. So I still volunteer with them from time to time, but starting to move back into my passions and my hobbies now, now that they're out of the house. So I try to keep giving back. So one of the things I was going to talk about was my personal experience over the last year now, working with 3D printing, and hopefully give you some good information, and you can decide if it's something you'd like to pursue, or again, work in partnership with another modeler who's already got some of these skills down, because you don't have to do it all alone. There's so many facets to the hobby. We can't possibly master them all, but we can certainly leverage each other from time to time. So, don't want to get back into the uglies now. It's been almost a year now since really life kind of stopped as we know it. Around Christmas of last year, talking with my oldest son, we're starting to see the news reports coming out of China. And for his business, he's had to go to China on numerous occasions for business. And he was agreeing, it's like, Dad, this is not looking good. This is going to get bad. You know, things are going to go south on us if we don't get on top of it. Unfortunately, they did. I went to remote learning, remote working. I'm an engineer, so I was fortunate to work from home. End of February, beginning of March. I think first week of March is when we officially started working remotely from home. And one of the things I decided early on that I wasn't going to be depressed or just take a very negative approach to this. I'm like, it's a life-changing event. It's happening. There's nothing we can do about it. We'll try to do our best to make it through this and get out the other side. But I want something positive to come out of this, too. I want this to be a positive life-changing event for me. So I decided that I'd start trying to get new modeling skills or try new things. Learn some things that I hadn't done that I always wanted to do. I had already started down the path of working with 3D modeling software with my time volunteering with the robotics team. I'm an electrical engineer by trade, so again, I don't usually model hard solids objects. Leave that to the ME guys. But we had lost our designer on the team, so I was kind of filling in that role. And one of the things I was trying to do was teach 20 eager students how to do 3D CAD work. And so I figured I'd better get up to speed on it. So I had already started down that path before COVID locked us down. Another thing that drove me in this direction was that, like all of us, we've got a lifetime's worth of to-dos on our hobbying list that we want to get through. There's models I want to build. There's things that I want to accomplish. And some of them were just on the very far future because they were just too difficult. I love the scratch build. I've built a lot of rolling stock up to this point. But there's certain things that were just going to be very time-consuming from a scratch building perspective. There were other issues where being in narrow gauge until Blackstone came along and came out with the ready-to-run cars, every piece of rolling stock I needed was a kit, or I had to scratch build it. It's very time-consuming to do that if I want to have a railroad that I wanted to operate. So I needed a way to streamline reproducing multiple cars to get up and running. So I began investigating 3D printing as a possibility. One of the things some of the positives I found from the lockdown was that, and working remotely, is I was saving time. I was saving about 2 hours of commuting time every day from my current job. It was great. For 33 years, I worked for the town of Wallingford, so my commute was about 6 miles one way. Worked for their public utilities there. So that was great, but I retired from that position and became a consulting engineer and was assigned to United Illuminating doing design work for their utility. So driving down to Orange every day from Meriden was, 40, 45 minutes on a good day. If there was a lot of traffic, it was an hour. So I was easily losing 2 hours a day of my life just in commuting. I instantly got that back because now I could get up in the morning, I could log onto my computer, I could go right to work, and at the end of the day, I logged off, and it was 12 steps down to the basement, and I could start hobby work. So I was gaining that time every day. Oh, I wanted to make sure it was productive if I was going to be locked in this house for almost a year now. The other thing, I was saving money. All that money was going into gas and maintenance of the vehicle and insurance on the vehicle. That money was found money essentially at that point. I all of a sudden had this money. I'm like, you know what? I can afford this major purchase of a 3D printer. So if this is worth doing, there's no better time to try to jump in than do it right now. And it just so happened at that point that some of the manufacturers of the 3D printers were going on sale. And quite frankly, I picked up my first printer for the cost of less than what a DCC-equipped locomotive would be today on the common market. So to me, that was an investment well worth making. First thing we'll talk about again is the 3D CAD modeling. Should you try to tackle two skills at one time, or should you forego it? And do I need 3D CAD modeling to be able to use a 3D printer effectively? And first off, the answer is absolutely no. You can do 3D printing without being able to do the 3D modeling. I already, like I said, had already started dabbling with 3D modeling. I had actually had Shapeways print some parts for me, some custom windows that I needed for a car project that I was working on. But like everybody who's tried using Shapeways, they're a little expensive. I think I spent $20 for the 12, dozen HO scale passenger car windows that I needed. Wasn't really happy with that price. But it worked. I learned some things there, and I felt it was worth pursuing this a little bit further. One of the things that kind of held me back for the longest time is that some of the 3D modeling software can get very pricey. It's designed for industrial applications, and most of them want to see an extensive return on their investment from the customers that are paying for this. The commercial license for SolidWorks, I think, starts at $4,000 for a single seat. So not something that a hobbyist is going to want to invest in. But the more I looked into it, there were literally dozens of softwares available in various ability levels that were either free or you could get them for very reasonable prices. So it's not something that can keep you back if you want to go into that aspect of it. You don't need a powerful CAD workstation for most of these softwares now. One of the latest trends with 3D CAD modeling is that they're web-based applications. So you don't need the software on your local machine. You can get away with an average home machine. You don't need excessive amounts of active RAM. You don't need a very powerful video driver card. You don't need lots of storage or high processor power. So all the things that would make a home computer very expensive to be able to run some of the CAD software, you don't need that anymore. It's just a web application you launch through their site. You use the software online. As long as you've got a good internet connection, you can do the 3D modeling. The other thing is that, as I mentioned previously, is you don't have to go into this aspect of it if you don't want to learn the 3D modeling skills. I have the handouts up here, and I'll go over it in a minute. But I found at least a dozen sites out there that are open source communities that offer 3D CAD for you to download, most of them for free. Some, they put a price on it. Some sites are a membership where you pay a price for the year, but then you can download what you want throughout the course of the year. Once you've downloaded the model, you can use it forever. You can put as many models as you need to. So it's another cost-effective tool for not having to use 3D modeling. This is a partial list, and again, it's on the handout, of free or fairly inexpensive 3D CAD software packages that are out there right now. I can tell you I haven't tried all of these, but I did do the research. I can tell you right now I have used SketchUp a little bit. I primarily use SolidWorks. Again, through my mentoring time with the robotics program, one of the benefits is I could get a free educational license of SolidWorks. So I've been using that in my time doing this. I've also downloaded the free version of Fusion's 360, which is, again, a very capable 3D modeling software package, and I've done some work with that. And with my experience with SolidWorks, I'm starting to pick that up pretty quick. I wouldn't recommend learning multiples or even getting multiples. The best thing you could possibly do is find other people, find out what they're using, and leverage their knowledge to make your skills improve much more quickly. It's a lot easier to ask a buddy, hey, how do I do this? In my case, I could call my son up. We usually talk at least once a week, and hey, how do you do this? I'm stuck on this. How do you do this? And he could walk me through it most of the time. And the other great thing is some of the big players, if you go on YouTube and do a Google search, there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of tutorials out there for different modeling packages on how to do things. Great thing with the software is you generally can't break anything. There's nothing you can really destroy if you make a mistake 3D modeling. So for me, what I found the easiest thing to do was start working with it, get the, know the basic operations, and then as I moved along, I was like, well, how do I do this? I would go on Google, I would make a specific search. How do I bend a piece of sheet metal using SolidWorks in this case? And there it is, 3 dozen videos on what commands you have to use and how you go about it. And so it was really pretty quick. I could go through and I could build an object fairly easily, and it didn't take me too long. I would say probably on and off over the course of a year, I've gotten to the point where I'd say I'm reasonably proficient now with the software. Some of the others out here that are on the list down towards the bottom, Blender is a big community out there too. They have tons. It's an open source community. The software is open source and free. In my mind, Blender is better for things like organics. If you want to model a cow, if you want to, the guy who does, I think it's 3D mini prints out of Canada, who has like every farm animal you can think of, that he'll print them for you. I'm sure he's using a software like Blender. I mean, He has a Sasquatch. Somebody asked him to make I think a yak. He has a yak. I don't know any of the American models that would be using a yak, but if you could think of an animal that you would buy like a model for your, I would check his site and you'll probably find it out there. So again, some of the ones down towards the bottom of the list are more organic modeling if you want to get into modeling figures. You could use that software. Offshoots of that, which is a whole other subject, is they make 3D scanners out there, basically a laser scanner. You can take an existing object and set it down and scan it from multiple angles, and the software will assemble it into the finished model for you, and you don't have to do any CAD work whatsoever. That's what a lot of people do for figures out there, is they'll get life-size people. There's another gentleman who does life-size railroad figures now, and he gets friends and family and coworkers to assume the position. He's got guys hanging off the side of a boxcar, signaling the engineer. He just got somebody to stand in the pose and dress in some clothing, and he scanned them, and he's 3D printing these objects now. So the sky's really the limit there on what you can do with this software. Personally, myself, I haven't found a limit to what I can't do yet. Just take some time to figure out how to do it. Again, the open source community for CAD models. Here's just a partial list of the websites where you can find free or virtually free 3D models that other people have drafted and have put it out there to the community. Say, here's what I did. If you like it, you can download it. You can bring it into your 3D software for your printer and set it up and print your own. I have not looked at every single one of these. Some of these are aimed more at the wargaming community, so there's a lot of fantasy figures and things like that. I don't know how much trained information is out there, but again, you can go to the sites, you can search them. Since most of them are free, no harm done. I can tell you some of the big ones on this list are, I didn't order the list necessarily in order here, but two of the big ones are right down here, Thingiverse and Yegi. There's a lot of model railroad stuff out there already available. So you can go out there and start searching, and there are box cars out there. There are cabs for specific diesel locomotives. If you want to modify one of your locomotives to a more specific prototype cab, somebody may already have a model out there for what you're looking for. And you can download these objects. If it happens to be the wrong scale, the printing software will allow you to scale up and scale down. So if you find an HO scale and you want it in O scale, you can put the scale factor in that you need, and you can enlarge the object and print it at the scale that you actually want. So it's very versatile that way. I've gotten to the point now with my 3D modeling where most of the objects I draft up now, I'll draft them at 1:1 scale. And then the last thing I'll do is I'll apply a scale factor. So if I need an HO, I'll just put in the 187.3 into my scale factor, shrink the model down, and it's ready to go off and get ready to be processed for the printer. So again, there's a vast library of open source software out there that's available. I've put a few out there. I've posted a few pictures over the years. People have asked me, hey, will you share that model with me? Sure. You know, I'm not in this for the business. If I can share something that I've already done, I'm happy to do that. So again, there's a vast array of people out there who are putting up free content that you can use with a 3D printer. All right, then you get into the nuts and bolts of, well, which printer do you want to get? There are three basic types. There's the FDM, fused deposition modeling, which is using the filament in the top image, usually a PLA plastic, or there's a lot of different plastics you can use with an FDM. They're inexpensive now. They have very large build volumes compared to some of the resin printers. Reasonably good detail. Some guys are getting phenomenal detail, but they're really spending a lot of time tweaking the software settings on their printers to get there. A little bit more than I'd like to spend time on. They do have printing layer striations, so you can see layer striations, because think of it as almost like icing a cake. It's melting the filament
It's extruding it under pressure out the nozzle, and it's running around, and it's following the profiles of whatever part. It does a whole layer, and it comes back and does the next layer, and it keeps going on and on. So each one of those printing layers, there's a little bit that squeezes out between them. So they do have some striations you have to clean up. Some guys are like, oh, it's no big deal. You take some acetone on a rag and you just rub it on there and it'll smooth it right out. That's, again, a little bit more work than I want to put into it. The other plus side is because they have the bigger building volumes and the striations are fairly small, at larger scale, low scale, garden railroaders, you know, no problem with an FDM printer. Probably a little bit better for like garden railroading and things like that. The other two, the DLP, digital light processing, or SLA, stereo lithography, it's really the same process, and the words get used almost interchangeably with some of these printers. The big difference is the SLAs are generally much more expensive printers. It's the things that Shapeways uses, and some of the others, Form Labs use these. They're using a directed beam of light to cure the resin as it goes along, as opposed to the DLPs, which are a lot of these really cheap resin printers that are out there now, where they're using a matrix of LEDs and they're turning on each individual LED pixel in the array to get the shape that they need for what's going on. The SLAs are really, really good printers. If you've got stuff from Shapeways, you know that they can do a really good job. Some of those are using liquid resins that they're curing. Others are using a powdered resin. And the light shining down and it cures just that layer. The rest of the powdered resin stays in a powder form. So when they're done, they literally just pick the part out of the powdered resin. They can recycle all that powdered resin. But the big benefit to that is there are no supports needed to hold the model as it's being printed, because that layer of powdered resin is the bed that the print is being formed in. So it's a clean process in that respect. But again, it's a more pricey than most of the SLAs I've seen out there. Cheapest you're going to get is about $2,000, and in some cases that's for a used model. So again, still a little bit beyond what we'd like to spend. The DLPs, it's the hobbyist dream at this point. The level of resolution is phenomenal. It's a fairly clean process. The material is inexpensive. The printers themselves are inexpensive. I bought my printer, like I said, I got it on sale for $249 with shipping. Less than the price of a locomotive to get a printer in stock. In my case, I have the printer shown here, the Photon S by Anycubic. It will do up to almost a 40-foot HO scale car in one shot with the printing volume that it has right now. They have new ones coming out. They'll be in the $500 to $800 range. The bigger print volume. They should print faster. I should be able to do up to about a 50-foot car. So me doing HO, narrow gauge, that printer will set me probably for life at that point, other than technology getting better. Pixels getting smaller, the software getting better. But they do a really good job. So those are the basics of what you have out there for home printers. Some learning sources. I know some people are averse to Facebook, but hey, it is one of the avenues out there. With IO groups, I'm a member of a lot of IO groups too, but they just came out with a new pricing scheme for the owners of these groups now, and they want to start charging by the head. So if you've got a large group and you've got 2,000 or 4,000 members, and you may be paying $2,000 a year to manage a site like that. Well, if you set this thing up for free, you're going to spend $2,000 a year to manage the site. Facebook hasn't done anything like that. So it has its pros. A couple key ones that I put up here that I found that were really good was there is a Facebook group that's 3D printing for model trains. Some of these guys will put free STL files up there, the file that you need to go right to your printers. Other guys will show you what they're doing. They'll gladly answer questions. Hey, how do I do this? What time settings? Anything that you need to know. There's a huge group of guys that have been doing it for a while. Leverage their knowledge, and you'll get your answers. There's also a group. They have a Facebook page, but they also do have a website, which is the Anycubic Photon Printers Owners group. Again, the same thing. Since I bought one, I joined that group, and if I got a question, don't know how to do something, somebody on there's got the answer. One of the key things that I found that they had is that their members had compiled a Google spreadsheet that we had access to as being members, for free, of course. Both membership and the spreadsheet was that people had listed every resin made by every manufacturer that they had printed with all the settings that you would need to set your printer up for exposure times and lift times. So I didn't have to experiment with anything. I let other people do the experimenting. I could take some of these numbers and run with them immediately. Over time, I've learned that I can make a few tweaks and get a little bit better, but really didn't have to do a lot of work there. And lastly, down the bottom here, I've got 3D Print Farm. There's a gentleman, he's got a YouTube channel, and he does a lot of videos specifically on 3D printing. I found his to be some of the most informative. He's pretty fun to watch, and he gets right to the nuts and bolts of it for the most part. He doesn't drag his feet. Some people just waste time with their YouTube videos before they get to the meat of what you're trying to learn from them. So I found his to be really good to use. But there's plenty out there that you can rely on to get the answers you need. Okay, so if you decide to go with a resin printer, what else do you need? Well, here's a list that I've compiled. Resins, basically it doesn't matter for the most part what manufacturers you use. They're interchangeable. I have used Elegoo resin with my Anycubic resin printer, along with Anycubic resin. I just bought another resin that I'm going to use for a specific detail. I'll talk about it a little bit later from another manufacturer. But essentially, if it's a UV activated resin, it will work with most resin printers that are running the that use this type of resin. The resin runs about $15 to $25 for a half liter, and about $25 to $30 for a full liter on Amazon. I can tell you right now that means I can print this large section of a wheel print that I did. This is probably about $1 worth of resin right there. You know, you get down to detail parts. I mean, we're talking pennies. If the printer screws up or I screw up with something, I've lost a few cents in, you know, some time letting the printer do its thing. So it's really an economical medium. I'm not afraid to make a mistake then. I'll try something. If I got to make changes, it's easy to do. No big deal. So I can iterate on some of my designs that I'm working on, test it, print it. I'll show some of that here as well. Pickle strainer may sound like an interesting one on the list there. You'll see it in the upper right-hand corner here. It's just a Tupperware container with a rubber gasket. These resin models, the standard resins clean up with isopropyl alcohol. So I just pour the isopropyl alcohol in the bucket, keep the lid on it, doesn't evaporate, and it has a small strainer basket inside, so I can just drop the parts in, let it sit for about 5 minutes, pick it up, swish it a few times as I'm pulling it out of the water or out of the alcohol, pull the parts out, drop them on some paper towels to dry. They're just about fully cleaned at that point. Some people use ultrasonic cleaners. That's your choice. I think I get almost as clean just putting them in, just soaking them in the alcohol for an extended period of time, and then just pull them out afterward. Isopropyl alcohol. So you clean up medium. It was great until the pandemic came along. I mean, the price of alcohol has gone probably doubled or tripled in the past year. Starting to slowly come back down again. But again, you can pick up 80 plus. Actually, you can get like 99.9% pure alcohol for about $35 a gallon on Amazon. You can use it down to about 80 strength, and it still works just as effectively. I haven't gone lower than that. When the pandemic was really raging, isopropyl alcohol, when it first started, you couldn't find it anywhere. Stores were all cleaned out. Everybody was wiped out. I tried using ethyl alcohol. Basically, it's glass cleaner, or it's also the same alcohol that's used in the old white fuel lanterns or cooking stoves for camping. It works well, but again, you don't want to breathe the fumes from that stuff as much because it is toxic as opposed to the isopropyl. Paper cone strainers and the funnel. Again, eBay, 100 count of the strainers, $13 to $16, and they throw in the funnel for the price. Use that to reclaim the resin that you haven't used in your printing. You can only leave it in the printer for so long. You've got to take it out, clean the vat, and especially if you're not going to be using it for a while. So that's a good investment to make, very small price. Next one are the microfiber cleaning cloths at about $12 to $16 for a 50 count package. And I take those out of the package. They're about 12 by 12. I cut them into quarters with my scissors. So I, quadrupled my quantity that I need for cleaning. Reason for those is for cleaning the vat that the resin sits in. It uses a clear film on the bottom that the UV light shines up through. If you use paper towels, they will slowly over time put micro scratches into the film. That's the bottom of the vat, and it'll get cloudy. It can degrade the quality of the prints. So if you want to keep them really good, use the microfiber cleaning cloths. To clean up the printer, best thing I got a tip from, and that came from 3D Print Farm, was Sprayway brand glass cleaner. $13 to $15 on eBay for a 3-pack of spray cans. You can also get this at Lowe's and Home Depot right around here. That's where I usually buy mine. I just go in and buy a can. I haven't gone through my first can of it yet. It's alcohol-based glass cleaner. I spray my vat with it, use my microfiber cloths to wipe it all out. Do that once or twice, and the vat's cleaned. I can put it back in the printer, and it's good to go. Nitrile gloves. Again, with the pandemic, what was once a cheap item to buy a box of gloves has gotten a little more pricey, but a 100 count box of gloves is about $25 to $35. If you do any airbrushing, you've probably got nitrile gloves anyway. I had a good stash going into the pandemic. But now as I've had to start replenishing, it becomes an issue. Reason for nitrile gloves is that the resin, when it's activated, and don't forget sunlight is an activator because it is UV light, the reaction is exothermic, which means it gives off heat. So if you have that resin on your skin and it activates, you could potentially get burned depending on how much resin you have on your skin. So I wear gloves. The other reason being is that most of these resins are made offshore, and I don't trust their MSDS sheets as much as I would trust an American-made company. They work under different standards. I don't know what's in them per se. I'm going to err on the side of safety, and I'm going to wear rubber gloves when I'm using the resin. An LED UV curing light. Essentially, it's a black light. That's down at the very bottom of the screen here. You can pick one up for about $25 to $35 on eBay or on Amazon. And the great thing is they'll give you a little sunlight-driven carousel, motorized carousel. So the parts will spin around, and you can hit them with the light from all directions. And they throw that in with the LED light. If you're a kid from the 70s and you have black light posters, your old black lights, they were UV fluorescent lights back in the day. You can use those. A respirator, again, the odor is very tolerable with the resins. My wife is pretty sensitive to smells and would certainly be complaining if I was hot foam cutting foam in the basement. She has not complained once when I've been using the printer down there. Usually what I'll do too is I'll have my spray booth set up and suck any possible fumes out through the spray booth as well. But again, since I don't trust a foreign-made product, I'm going to wear the respirator on the side of caution. Again, if you do paintings, airbrushing, spray painting, you've already got a respirator, so you're good to go there. Paper towels, the rest of your cleanup, you need that, dry off the alcohol-soaked parts. I still wash them after they've dried. I'll usually take them to the shop sink, soap and water, and a toothbrush, and I'll scrub them up to get any more off. And lastly, a good set of screw cutters, which most of us as modelers have a good set of screw cutters. I find that for cutting the supports off to be invaluable. The resin tends to be a little on the brittle side. It will flex. But if you try to just break the supports off, you can chip out divots in the part that you really want, which is the model. So screw cutters come in handy for that. So again, for about another $100, you can equip yourself up if you don't already have the parts for most things you would need to do the 3D resin printing. So it really, to me, it was a reasonable investment to make in the new skill. All right, we'll get into the blow-by-blows now. Well, first thing is either create a model or download one from one of the free sites. The image you see here is a Denver and Rio Grande Western 6200 series flat car. To the best of my knowledge, there was no commercial model of this ever produced in kit form or any other way. I believe some gentleman may have for a while put out a laser cut kit, but they were a very short run and they didn't last very long. So it was one that I really wanted to get into my fleet because it fits in well. I modeled in the late 40s or early 50s during the gas and oil boom. And these cars had been rebuilt in 1926 at that point. They took them from a standard 30-foot car. They extended them to 36-foot cars. And they reinforced both the center sills and the outer sills with steel angle. And one of the characteristics of the car that I wasn't relishing modeling, scratch building, was the series of rivet holes that were punched into the angle iron on the outside of the car there. A very distinctive feature, and I really was hoping I could get that to show up. And I did not want to sit there and have to hand drill that many holes just for aesthetics. So it was a project that was on my to-do list. Someday I'll get to it. I'm just not going to go through this mess right now. Even to build one master and, you know, mold it at that point was not something I was ready to tackle. And again, this was a car that I wanted at least a half dozen for my railroad. So it was going to require multiple scratch builds or, again, doing a master. With 3D printing now, I can print them out as often as I want. If I want to build more of them, there were 20 cars in the series. I could build all 20 if I wanted to without too much work. So again, one of the great things too with 3D printing, if anyone has ever tried to cast their own parts, either with rubber molds and a casting resin, or if you've tried to do any kind of metal, low temperature casting, there's a lot that goes into building that mold and building the masters. You have to think about things like undercuts. The part has to come out of the mold when I create the mold. With 3D printing, all that stuff goes away. So everything you see in this image of the flat car, the body bolsters, any of the underbody details that I decided to include. There's undercuts, there's gaps behind them. That goes away because the 3D printer is only going to print what it sees at each layer. So I could do a much more complicated one-piece casting here, and then it literally only took me 1 or 2 nights to put all the appliances on, and that car is going to go in for my master car modeler's AP certificate. So again, I thought this was a really great time-saving effort, and it got a project off my to-do list that I would have never done in any other form. The CAD software will normally output it in its native CAD format, but then you can also save it in other formats. The standard for most printing 3D printers is a .stl file. Some of the printers will also use an object file, .obj. You just have to know what your printer takes, and you can usually get them either way. And if you get it in one form, you can usually convert it to another form with a minimal amount of work. All your 3D printers then come with their own software, which will take this .stl file and set it up so that it's ready to print. In this case, one of the things you can see is the flat car is it gives you the volume bed of the printer in question, so I can now orient the object on the printer and make it fit. In this case, I've got to set it at an angle. So all this spaghetti you see off the bottom are supports that have had to be added so that I can hold the part as it's printing. So these are all being printed simultaneously. because it's going to start at the build plate. This is all going to print literally upside down from what you see here. And it's going to start building those layers. So I need to start building those supports so that when I get to the actual model, there's something there for the model to stick to. And because what happens is the print bed comes down into the vat of resin, and it will literally, it goes down and stops at the desired thickness of the print level you want. And in this printer's case, the maximum resolution of the thinnest layer I can print is 0.02 millimeters, which I think is about 50 microns. I don't think I could do that with my scratch building. I don't think I could get that level of resolution. So what you can get out of the printer is just phenomenal. And it cures the resin onto the build plate or onto the previous layers of resin, but it's also curing it partially onto the clear film of the vat. Now when it lifts up, the vat will flex and it will allow it to release from the vat film, and then it'll come back down and it'll start the next print layer. So you've got to have these supports so that it has something that's already cured that it can pull the part off of as it's printing. It doesn't take a lot to figure that out. There's software settings that it will apply the support layers automatically. You don't have to do anything. So several times I've used that setting right off the bat. Just put the layers on for me as I was learning the software. As I've gotten better, I've figured out where I can put the supports myself. Sometimes I'll do it myself. Sometimes I'll use the software to do the settings. Then once it's done, you'll see the large blue button down here says slice on it. That literally takes that 3D object now and goes layer by layer by layer and takes a snapshot of just whatever's on that layer and creates the image that's going to tell the printer what LEDs in the matrix to turn on. And it'll go through and compile the whole thing. The last thing you do is you hit save, and it saves the file in the format that your printer will want to use. That's all there is. It's ready to go to the printer at that point. That step with their software is less than a half hour. Bring the part in, orient it how you want it on the printer, and add the supports, slice it, save it, ready to go. In my case, the media to send them over is just a thumb drive. So put the file on the thumb drive, plug it into my printer, and I'm ready to go on the printing. So again, that's the last step, is start on the printer. So again, you can see the menu up here. The flash drive that I had on it at the time had 4 different models on it that I could print from. And photo on the right shows a finished tender shell sitting there waiting for me to come in and get it. Basically, the build plate unscrews from the mechanism. I just slide it out, turn it over, take a plastic paint scraper, and go in against the plate and pop it off. Drop it in the alcohol, let it clean. I'll take the build plate, I'll spray it down with the sprayway glass cleaner, wipe it all down with a paper cloth because I don't have to worry about scratching there. Throw that away, put the build plate back in, and I'm ready to start the next one. I can go back and start printing another part. So as fast as these come off, I can just start printing another part. So sometimes I'll batch them up. Printing process can be a lengthy process. Those flat cars took, I think, about 12 hours to print at 0.02 millimeters of resolution. If I went to 0.05 millimeters, I probably wouldn't lose a heck of a lot of detail, and it would probably cut the print time down to about 8 hours. So on some of these prints, I start at night, I go to bed, wake up in the morning, it's Christmas, I get to see what came off the printer. It's not always foolproof. I brought a couple of goofs today. They're not horrible, but not quality enough to use it in a model. And it's just a learning process there. But again, the printing is the easiest part about it. You can see the vat here. You see the liquid resin sitting in the vat. The thumb screw that you see on the side of the image here, there's 2 thumb screws in my model that hold the vat in. I just loosen those up. I slide the vat out. I can pour it back. Again, use the paint strainers to strain out any solid particles. I'll check the bottom with a rubber belt finger. Make sure there's no cured parts of resin that are still stuck to the plastic film. Occasionally that'll happen. I'll take my clean finger, I'll just run it along the bottom, and you can usually just pop that, and once it's moving, you can wipe it out. Again, spray it down with the sprayway glass cleaner. Now use the microfiber cloth, clean the whole vat out, and it's ready to put away until the next time you use it. It's a very simple process, very low overhead. I was really shocked as I got into it about how easy it was to do this printing. All right, as I said, drop it in the alcohol, and then the last step is going to be, once it's cleaned, washed, as I previously mentioned, start cutting off the screws. In this case, I use factory settings in the left image here, so you can see there's a ton of supports that are built on this car. And I go through and snip those all away, take them off. It can be time consuming, but again, it's worth it. When you get a model that's almost ready to prime and go to work on it. Curing of parts. When the parts come out, the resin is cured. It may not be 100% cured, depending on the light settings you're using. You want to go just enough to solidify the resin, but it may not be that the part is fully cured. There's two ways to do it. The low-cost way, and the real easy way, is take the part out, put it in direct sunlight for about 10 or 15 minutes, maybe flip the part over, let it sit there for another 10 or 15 minutes. The resin's cured, you're done. It's ready to go. The other way is to get the UV light, which I bought one of those. Got a $5 Home Depot jobber bucket, 5-gallon bucket. I built little straps. The light sits on the top of the open bucket. I line the inside with aluminum foil, shiny side towards the inside of the bucket. Put the little rotary disc at the bottom, put the light on it, and again, run it for 5 minutes and cure it that way. That makes sure that the resin is fully cured at that point. That's really all there is to it. Sometimes if I have a lot of supports like this, I'll remove the supports before I fully cure it. The resin tends to be more flexible, and sometimes you can tear those supports off without doing any damage. If the resin is fully cured, I would cut the supports off. It's a little more brittle at that point. Okay, so what can you make with this? Well, here we go. We'll start with some of the small ones and give an idea of what kind of detail resolution you can get to. Another project for my Master Car Builder certificate is in passenger cars. Here I am working on the parlor car Chama here. Something I've never seen commercially available are the passenger steps that will allow customers into the cars. Every railroad had them. Everyone is virtually the same. I mean, they're roughly the same dimensions. The opening cutouts are all the same. There were manufacturers that made them. Some were made out of wood. Nobody had a casting of these things. I'm like, I need those on the car. I need it for the super decaling. Well, it took me 20 minutes to CAD up with that thing and send it to the printer. The other thing was PSC, since they've been bought out. It's hit or miss on what kind of detailed brass casting parts you can find out there now. One of the ones that I was having a hard time finding was pre-cord marker lamps. The parlor car was at the end of the train. I need those marker lamps out there. I want the car lighted. Again, took 20 minutes in my CAD software to build a very simple, fairly accurate design of the marker lamp, pre-cord in all directions, print the things out. Once they were ready, painted them. They're ready for, surface mount LEDs now, and then put lenses in them, and I'm done. They go on the car. So I'm not searching websites, eBay, for people who've got stashes that they're willing to sell. Made my own. It really goes a long way. The photo on the left is actually a Garden Rail. It's an FM3. It's the buffer plate for a 800 or 700 series drop bottom gondola for the Rio Grande. I had a friend who said, "Hey, could you make me this part?" Sure, no problem. Here you go. He sent me some great high resolution photos. I've got the inner and outer plates here. One of the things you'll notice is I've actually got the foundry marks in the model. I've got the raised lettering. If you were scratch building, you'd have a hard time getting down to foundry marks, something like that. It's crazy what you can do. If you want, you can pass these around here, and you can see for yourself that the detail is pretty phenomenal that you can reach with some of these parts. It's just amazing. And one item that I did not show in the picture with the parlor car that I have it here too is CAD'd up and printed out the diaphragm for the vestibule end of the car. Nobody makes a narrow gauge vestibule to the car. And you're like, well, people walk through it. It's got to be the same size as standard gauge. No. Narrower cars, the thing's narrower, it's shorter. So it took some time, printed it up. This isn't just the hard resin now. I just purchased some new resin that says it's flexible. We'll see how flexible it is. Ultimately, I'd love it if my buffers could mate up when the cars are coupled and have the flexibility to handle a corner. So we're going to see if I can get to that stage or not. It's something worth experimenting with. What else? Here we go. Another project that was sitting dormant for almost 10 years is I had built the Durango Press narrow gauge rotary that's a fairly close model to the Rio Grande's rotary OM. And when I modeled it in 1950s, the Rio Grande was running an auxiliary tender for extra water capacity, which was an old Class 56 tender. And it had only been produced once in imported brass, one run. I don't have the brown book, so I don't know how many were produced. I have never seen one on the resale market, ever. So if I wanted to have the auxiliary tender and make my model complete, I was going to have to build it. Not looking forward to scratch building the tender shell. I did the paper wrapper that came with the kit for the primary one. I could certainly do that again if I wanted to, but with the flared tops and everything, I'm like, there's got to be a better and less time-consuming way to do this. CADing it up was a little bit of an adventure. Probably took me about 4 weeks on and off working on it. Again, I was still in the learning stages with the software, but the hardest part was figuring out how to get the rivets on the curves. Because most of these CAD softwares like to work on nice flat surfaces. So how the heck do I get the rivets on the curves? In my case, I went a two-part approach and I cheated out. I figured out that I could bore holes on a curve. I figured out how to do that. So what I did is I bored holes that were the correct diameter for the rivets to go through. I CAD'd up a scale rivet as a separate model. And then with the SolidWorks software, I could do what's called assembly. I could take multiple parts and bring them in and put them together. So that's what I did to create the final model. And then the last thing I did is I saved it as a single model again and got out that way. I've got a few copies here. Some are still on the screws. One's been cleaned off. The screwed ones were slight grooves you'll see on the lower corner where some of the supports failed as it was starting to print, so the corner of the tender has curved up a little bit. They'll probably go in a junk pile behind the roundhouse at some point on the layout, but again, the level of detail, every rivet is on there, and it's be a fairly difficult task with scratch building. The other thing you'll see in the model is one of the things that really stood out in the handful of photographs that showed this tender is that it was run backwards to the rest of the rotary because, again, they were only using it for extra water capacity because they couldn't make it between water stops. So they just needed water capacity. So the coal bunker was never full of coal. So that end of the car was always light. And if you're bucking through snow, they had problems with derailing. So the shop got really smart, and they dropped the wheel set on the deck where the firemen would originally stand, just as balanced. And it turned out that, looking through the photographic evidence, it was one of the original wheel sets, probably from the tender for the rotary, because it had a standard gauge length axle, but the wheels had been set at narrow gauge. They had turned the axle down and pressed the wheels into narrow gauge. That was one of the factory fits for that rotary steam locomotive when it came in as new to the railroad. It was built as a standard gauge rotary, but they shipped it with custom axles and wheel sets that were set for 3-foot gauge. It never ran on the standard gauge. They took the standards off and they put the narrow gauge trucks on. So they're wide trucks with narrowed wheel sets onto them. So it was that, and it was also one of the originals because it was a riveted wheel set, and I believe they became outlawed in like 1900 as being dangerous by the Railroad Administration. So nobody had a model of a riveted wheel set out there. So again, built that. And the last detail is the car still had its water leg handles for controlling the flow of water to the locomotive. I did those as a separate 3D print. So I literally printed out HO scale water leg handles, drilled the top of the car and slid those in, glued them in place. So I've got the water leg handles on there. If anybody wants to see, I've got the models here too that you can see. So you don't have to do the whole car. You can do bits and pieces and details as I've shown now. So the versatility is really out there if you really want to do some interesting things with the cars. A couple other ones I'll just touch on briefly here because I didn't put slides in for them. Here's a quick and dirty boiler I needed in the rotary. It's got a boiler in there. The model doesn't have one. I needed view blocks in there. So I was like, you know what? 15 minutes putting some circles together, paint this thing black. I can put it in the model. And now if somebody looks through a window, they're going to see an obstruction before it goes out the other side. The inside of the model is not hollow, but I haven't invested a lot of time into it. So again, just something as simple as that you can go on. And as I had mentioned before with the software, with the scaling features, I can change any sizes. I had two different modelers who were really interested in an accurate Griffin Foundry 26-inch wheel that was ubiquitous on the narrow gauge system for the Rio Grande. So I created the model of it, and one is in FN3, 1 to 20.3 scale, and the other one, this large half a piece that's about as big as I can fit in the printer. This was for a gentleman who's doing live steam, and he's doing 2.5-inch scale. So has all the foundry marks on it in both scales. These were negative prints, but again, it shows you that once you've done it, I could go down to N scale if I really wanted to, and you'd never see the foundry marks would never come through at that scale, but it's definitely an option that's available. Then back to the cover shot of the 6200 series flat car. Again, here's the finished model. I've installed all the brake rigging. I've installed all the hangers, all the stirrup steps, handrails, cut levers, brake rods. One of the things I did with this model is that something that's kind of distinctive on it is, unlike most of the narrow gauge cars, this car sat really, really high. They took standard gauge body bolsters and they cut them down to narrow gauge width and put them under this car. This car rides very, very high on its trucks. So the underbody is fully exposed to be seen, so I needed all that detail. Again, back to the stretch modeling that I love to do. But one of the things too is the draft gear boxes. Especially down when you get into HO scale, it's so hard to hide the scale our model couplers in a scale model. In this case, when I catted it up, I widened the inside sills, the main sills, so that I could fit the new KD705 coupler in there. And I actually have the steel I-beams that were on either side that lagged the prototype coupler into position. So I have the Farlow draft gear as it shows on the side of the car, and it has all its rivet details on it. Here's a couple of test shots I did as I was going through time to get everything to fit right. And again, since one of these prints, other than the time it took, I'm talking 30, 50 cents worth of resin to do a test shot and go, no good. I got to change this. A couple of heights are wrong. I probably went through 7 or 8 revisions until I got everything exactly right on the for the finished car. And now I'm ready to go. I've got another one. I think I have it here. Yep. I brought one. Brought another finished print. I can happily pass this one around too. This one's ready to go. You'll see the resin comes in lots of different colors too. But you can inspect the detail. You can see not only on the side are the hole punches in the angle, but on the bottom of the sills, something that you would never see when the car's in operation, all the holes are there too, so I was able to add those in too. It would be a massively time-consuming effort on a scratch-built model any other way that I can think of other than building one master and, you know, reproducing it, or drilling a lot of holes by hand with a jig, and I didn't want to do that. This is probably I'm most happy with this car at this point. This is probably one of the best things I've done with the 3D printer so far. If I can't tell a better reason why you might want to try playing with one of these things than that, is I don't know what is. I haven't even scratched the surface now. I have a structure project that I've been sitting on for probably 15 years, partially finished now. It was an electrical power generating plant. It is exactly to scale. I've got 60 stock windows that I need to do, that I either have to scratch build them or make molds. Now I can 3D print them. And it's got big windows, so I need to put details on the inside of the structure. And everything in this power plant, it had 3 boilers, 3 generators, so everything's in 3s or 9s. So to build them, I'd be making a lot of molds and masters to do that. Now I can 3D print these things. May not be for everybody in conclusion. You know, if you like to build and you want to try a new technology, I really think this is something that's going to change the hobby in the long run. A lot of young kids are already doing this stuff. I mean, if we're going to attract younger kids into the hobby, this is the way to go. When I was at the robotics team, occasionally they have a laser cutter, and I've cut some parts for some structure models down there, and the kids were just fascinated with that stuff. So, you know, so in this, you know, I can hook some people into the hobby through that. The price was well worth it. The prices keep coming down. I've seen some of the printers now. The original Photon is down to, I think, $169 now, which is, print-wise, it's almost the same size as the Photon S that I have. I mean, it's maybe 1/4 of an inch smaller print volume. It only has 1 rail inside, so it may not be quite as durable as the Photon S, but still, at $169, well worth trying to jump in to the hobby. It's cost effective for setting up the prints. I kind of went through that. As I mentioned, compared to conventional casting methods, I don't have to worry about undercuts or filling areas in. The print will print exactly what I want it to print. So it really opens up your ability on how complicated you can get with these parts. This will never supplant the manufacturers in the hobby. You know, we're not going to be slitting their throats. There's always going to be a need for casting manufacturers doing detail parts and stuff. We're never going to supplant them. I don't see that ever happening. High volume stuff, it's much more cost effective for them to build molds and cast either injection mold or wax investment casting parts than it is for us to 3D print them. Again, it's technology, but it's just another tool. I mean, if you think about some of the technologies that have come out over the years from when I was young in the hobby compared to nowadays, it's just an evolution of the hobby. We're getting to a point where we can do more and more amazing prototype stuff, especially if you're a prototype modeler. This really opens the door for what you can do. And again, if it's a part that was never created commercially, or a model that was never created commercially, or the part's no longer commercially available, this is a viable alternative. One of the structure projects I've worked on is on my layout when I start building it. One of the focal points will be Chama, New Mexico. And since I'm modeling the oil and gas boom, I've got to have the oil loading facility there. It's really a pipe structure. It was only produced once by, I think, Chama Model Works back in the 70s. Again, no models ever come back up on the market ever, you know, to this day. The ones that are out there have all been snatched up. They're not to be had. I was going to have to build it myself. 3D printing may be the way to go. I've sat down, I've CAD'd it all up. I have an accurate set of drawings now. No one had ever had an accurate set of drawings. I now have that in my possession. I learned a lot while I was CADing that thing through my research. So again, it's probably going to be down the road. I'll be able to do that. Beyond the normal prints here, Shapeways does offer some other unique things that you can do with 3D printing. Is you can do investment casting through Shapeways. It's pretty pricey, but if you needed something and you wanted it in brass or steel or something like that, they will 3D print the wax mold for the investment casting, for the lost wax casting, and they'll make the mold and they'll pour it in brass for you. Silver, gold, if you really want it. So it's an amazing thing you can do. One of them on my list for down the road, maybe when it's nice to do, is the Rio Grande Southern in its heyday when it was first constructed. Otto Mears, his passes were filigree silver. They were hand-carved passes that went to people that were worthy of getting one of these passes. I saw one go up for sale at an auction. I think it went for somewhere around $40,000 for a historic one. There are only a few hundred of these things to deal with. I thought, how cool would it be to CAD one of these things up, and instead of doing paper passes like we used to do, you can have somebody a 3D printed filigree pass with a name on it. Paint it silver, you know, or use rub and buff or something, make it look like a silver pass, and hand them a 3D pass for your railroad. You know, if guys come over on a work session and help you out, hey, here you go, here's a pass for the railroad. Yeah, you can do some amazing things out there. Any questions? And thank you for your time.
Yes, just one.
Yes.
I noticed on the, especially that big gap wheel, that radius.
Yes.
A true radius.
Yes,
That's flat.
that is an artifact from the 3D modeling. Curves are all done in segments. So again, depending on what you set your software to, you can smooth that out. But again, I took something that was, I'm pushing the limits there by going to a 2.5-inch scale. And the other issue was that the gentleman was looking for, he wanted a casting master. So I'm like, okay, he's going to turn the tread surface when he's done. So I just oversized my servo file over what he would need, and now he can chuck it up in his lathe when he gets the casting back from the foundry, and he can turn the tread profile and get a perfectly smooth curve. Yeah, yeah, it has to do with how the CAD software creates the models. Curves are all done, to make curves or circular surfaces, they're done with little triangular facets. In that case, since it's a circular pattern, they just become little rectangles. And again, it becomes how many little rectangles you want to make. Every rectangle adds more and more data to the model. And you know, some of your models can get enormous. It's not stuff that you can send readily through an email attachment or something. So there's a point where you draw the line. But for most of our modeling, from O scale on down, you're virtually not going to see those kind of facets.
No, I'm not. It wasn't generally very apparent on the smaller.
Yes.
That one.
Yeah, that's pushing it right now. Technology is going to get better. You know, just like, you know, you think about our LED TVs in our houses, our flat screens. When those things came out, they were thousands of dollars. You know, now you can get them. You know, Best Buy's $400 for something that probably used to cost $10,000 back then, because they've just gotten so much better at making the LED arrays. Same thing's going to happen with these printers. The LEDs are just going to get tighter and tighter and tighter, so we get to the theoretical absolute limits that they can produce at. I mean, we're talking, they're down to a few molecules for an electronic gate now on a processing chip. So there is a point where you're going to hit the limits, but some smart guy will figure out, hey, you know what, we can build these in multiple layers. So we can offset them in, you know, and somebody will figure it out. Somebody out there, I'm confident they'll figure out how to get the resolution down even more.
Right. Depends on the size of the file you want to
Yes.
create, how big the process is.
Yeah.
You would run it.
Yep. I mean, that one there, that big wheel, I think that was about, the print file going to the printer was somewhere in the neighborhood of 250 megs. So that's a huge file. Huge file. Yes, Jeff?
Art, is there a reason they're all at an angle? I noticed your picture of the flag car. Is it like a
Yes.
That
That is an excellent question. One of the things you'll learn, and I learned it through the videos that I watched, is that you have surface tension when that part needs to come and pull off of the printing film. And if you print flat and it's a large area, there's a lot of force needed to get that part to separate, and that's where you get a lot of your print failures. So it is better to set the part at an angle, so now you're just taking a small slice. So if you think about that shell of the tender, even the top deck of that tender plate, instead of being one huge part that you have to pull off the film, it's now a small slice, you know, maybe 3 or 4 scale inches thick that it's pulling off around the perimeter of that part. So you have a much higher rate of success by angling your parts. The other thing I found too is that on long straight surfaces, you will still get some printer striation. For the most part, if you're not over curing the resin in the printer, the striations pretty much get covered up by priming the model. You know, I use the Tamiya ultrafine detail primer and give that one shot of that, and I don't see the printing lines in it. If I had to, I had some early on test prints. You could scrape it down. I've used like an X-Acto chisel blade and gone in perpendicular to the surface and just scrape the striation lines off very gently. That works. But I found that angling the part a little bit like that helps to reduce those lines quite a bit too. It's just little things you learn as you try to do some prints. Any others? No?
Thank you, Art.
Oh, thank you.
So everybody, has anybody online got anything they want to bring up? Because that was the end. We don't have any virtual layout tours today. I would like to make sure if we go, we're going to have an April meeting like this, and like any input we can in terms of other clinics anybody wants to give, and then a virtual layout tour if anybody has. A virtual layout tour, just so you know, can be as easy as you take a video and you send it to us, and we'll show the video, or through this vehicle, we could actually turn the camera over to you, and then you would show from your own house by using your own laptop or whatever, if you're doing it that way. So I think we can, I think it's theoretically possible to do a virtual layout tour through these mechanisms, but we really just need a volunteer who's going to share their home layout with us to do that. Does anybody got any other questions about it? Anything here in the room? Everybody good? Anybody online? Got anything you want to pass or any questions?
I could quickly show the G-gauge water tank I'm working on.
Okay. For the people in the room, let me, okay. So the people in the room can now see you, John.
Okay. I have this around the layout room shelf railroad, and I'm going to mute myself here. Hope that's better. I needed a water tank, and I didn't want to buy one. Don't know if I could find something that I liked. When we changed the furnace out, got a new humidifier, and the old one had this form that foam drum went on, rotated through water, and air blew through it to humidify the air in the winter. I thought that looked handy, so I saved it. And took this little HO water tank, was sitting on a house because they're not glued together, and came apart when I was bringing it up to where the computer is. This looks tiny in HO, and you know, G is one of these odd scale things that can treat it as 20.3 or 24 or 22.5 or 29 to 1. Well, I'm treating mine as 24 to 1, which makes the G gauge track a 42-inch, 3.5-foot narrow gauge. so the cards are probably a little small, but it works. And so I thought I'd take this and scale it up from 187th to 124th, and all of a sudden it changes a lot. Here they are side by side. It's amazing. And this is made with 3/4 inch pine cut into 1/2 inch wide strips, glued around a floor that was made out of 1/8 inch thick pine strips that were cut to fit under this form. So that was the shape for the floor. So that it was a little small, so I used 3/4 inch thick strips to build up the outside diameter to 7.5 inches. I got this far and I had to take the form out because if I'd gone much farther, it wasn't going to come out anymore. What I did with these strips is put them side by side on a machinist square so they were not leaning, and put a dozen together with masking tape strips, ran carpenter's wood glue between, and wrapped them around this form with glue on the bottom to stick them to the floor that was under the form. It's massive, you know, it's 42 times the volume. 3.5 squares to the third power is 42. So all of a sudden this little thing got huge. I did not, these pieces were pre-cut, they don't have a taper. I thought a gap would be minimal. Well, wrong. It's an 1/8 inch between pieces. So there's only this little bit of wood glue on the inside and it wasn't very sturdy. I filled with hot melt glue places, a couple different heights to hold it, to reinforce it, to make it stronger. And then I filled in between with joint cement for doing sheetrock walls. So you get to use different materials if you don't want to spend a fortune on it. But it's been fun. I need to make a top to put in there to hold the circular part and then glue the rest of the pieces on, finish it off. And it should be fun. I want to try to make actual hollow spout plumbing out of thin brass sheet. So we'll see if that works. But anyway, and you can't see that against the window. Anyway, it's fun in a different size. All of a sudden, it's a whole different sort of project. But been interesting.
That is totally over the top, Don. That is amazing. That's got some photos. All right.
I better mute myself.
All right. Well, I was glad we had a meeting of some sort, right? Sad to see we missed December, so we'll definitely do one in April. If we can't get into Weathersfield, we may just come back to here and do this again from here. I don't know how centrally located Cheshire is to everybody, but it's kind of pretty close to Weathersfield in the state, so hopefully it's okay. But thank you everybody for coming, and we'll look forward next time in April. We'll do the election for the board member, and then that's about it. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
See ya.